Good evening. The mayor will be a little late this evening, and I will take care of things until she arrives. This is the city council meeting of December 18th, and I will open the public comment session with the first person on the list, Gene Tacey.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I attended a meeting of the panel of committees and department directors held at JFK on December 1st for the discussion of approving an additional 100 units of housing at Hospital Hill. Although it was said that no decision had yet been made, it was pretty obvious. Public comment was not afforded at this meeting, but the public was invited. The Citizen Advisory Committee was involved in the discussion, as was the Department of Mental Health, the Housing Partnership, and many others that would benefit from the additional housing. Therefore, hard questions were not asked. Or if they were answered with statements of convenience rather than with statements of fact, such as fire and police protection. The mayor says we will not have to hire any more police or firefighters or purchase any more equipment. The only real increase will be the DPW. Wow, what a statement. Every year, year after year, our police chief and his department are strapped at bare bones. Call volume has risen through the roof. Need more officers. Mayor promising more officers to councilors. Is he not telling us the truth? What about the impact on schools? The mayor says that will be minimal, as these types of households historically have a lower rate of kids in the school system. We have done the studies. That would mean to me that we have plenty of room in our schools, and class size being a problem is a lie. I would have posed some real questions to Dave from the Department of Mental Health and his organization, which we are bound by statute to provide 15% of what we build to his department without recourse. The mayor will say anything to achieve her goal, regardless of the impact on the taxpayer. I believe our police chief and our superintendent are telling us the truth, but the mayor does not care. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Best practices might want to take this one up, and maybe appointments and evaluations. The chair of the Conservation Commission was appointed in January of '07. His application and his address states he lives on West Street in Northampton. But my investigation shows to me he lives on Petticoat Hill Road in Williamsburg and has since 2005. But what has this member presided on over in the city, and to what end? Anything to achieve the goal, I guess, except the truth. Today, this was posted, and I was at the meeting when Jack Horner posed this question several times, and it was never answered. What is the percentage of affordable housing at this place? Is it going to be 50% on what's already been approved? And is this 100 units? What is the percentage of affordable on the 100 units? What is the percentage that we're going to have to provide to the Department of Mental Health, whether it be on-site or off-site? Just the questions that just don't seem to get answered. Yet it was approved, and nobody has been able to define anything or show us any kind of a plan.
Gene, you have 30 seconds.
I'm all through.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Adele Franks.
Good evening. I am here as co-chair of the Nonotuck Land Fund, and I'm here to ask for your support for our Marble Brook Conservation Project. I'm going to use my 3 minutes to highlight some of the key features and public benefits of the project that we are undertaking with the Board of Public Works and the Department of Public Works. Basically, we are planning to purchase a conservation restriction, a permanent conservation restriction on 168 acres of pristine land on the northwest portion of Northampton. The Board of Public Works will hold the conservation restriction for the city, and the Department of Public Works will conduct ongoing stewardship of the land. The features of the land that are worth knowing about are many. There are a wide variety of mixed wildlife habitats, a multitude of native species of trees, shrubs, and flowers. There are several kinds of wetlands on the parcel, and Marble Brook bisects this parcel. There's a special function of this land also because it's watershed land, and it drains into the Roberts Reservoir complex and thereby contributes to Northampton's backup emergency water supply. The land has been in the Clapp family for 6 generations, and the current owners, 2 sisters and their families, desire to keep it under family ownership. However, they would like to protect it forever from development or any form of destruction. The conservation restriction we thought was a good choice for this land because it offers a high level of permanent protection and also offers a much lower cost than, for example, outright purchasing of the land to protect it. We've negotiated with the family to provide up to 12 supervised hikes every year, which we think is an excellent compromise because it allows the public to enjoy the land, but it also helps to protect the sensitive ecosystems that in fact are cleaning the water. The features of this project are well aligned with the priorities of Northampton's open space plan, the sustainability plan, and the community preservation plan, and this project has enjoyed widespread community support. We've worked very hard for a long time to bring this project to where it is right now, which is on your desk for a first reading tonight, and we hope that you will give us your full support. Thank you.
Thank you. Jesus Leva.
Hi. I actually want to speak directly to David Murphy tonight, as my ward counselor. In the event that the DPW does file to expand the landfill, I would like you to vote against it. I'm asking you to vote against it because it's not in the interest of Northampton to run a regional landfill. I'm asking you to protect the quality of life of the residents around the landfill and also to protect East Hampton's future drinking water supply.
Your opinion is so noted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Silva.
Good evening, Kathy Silva, 119 Riverside Drive in the Bay State area of Florence. Tonight I come before you to share my confusion and frustration. In 2005, people expressed skepticism about the CPA regarding how and who was going to administer the fund. As more information was generated, there was an acceptance by some voters who felt having all recommendations go through this council was a safety net. This safety net would protect funding of necessary projects and filter out questionable others. In the end, people felt comfortable that the council would have the final say on discretionary spending, and the CPA passed, but only by 51%. When the CPA was passed, I thought people were pretty clear about the CPA board being out of the hands of the city. So I was taken back when I learned that Jack Horner, Fran Volkman, Lily Lombard, and George Cohat were all members of the Broad Brook Correlation, who had previously received CPA money, and that Jack Horner, Lily Lombard, and George Cohat are members or past members of the Nonotuck Land Fund, who is currently asking for over $118,000 of CPA funding this round. Tonight you are being asked to authorize several funds which takes discretionary spending out of your hands. One is for $10,000 by the city's Conservation Commission for time-sensitive space acquisition. This request was brought forth by Bruce Young, who sits both the Conservation Commission and the CPA board. Another request comes from nonprofit Valley CDC. Nonprofit Valley CDC uses city, state, and federal monies to build units in the city and then sells the property to their for-profit LLCs for a couple dollars. Valley CDC is asking you tonight to appropriate over half of this round's funding to them for various reasons. One appropriation is for $85,000 so that they can set up a foreclosure fund which would loan $7,500 to people who are facing foreclosure. It's not really a loan because if the individuals remain in their homes for 5 years, the loan is forgiven.
You have 1 minute.
Although this is a great idea, I wonder if Valley CDC should be the sole resource of this fund. An interesting point, the number of foreclosures and petition for foreclosures that Valley CDC in their application process stated was 35 in 2007, but our own principal assessor said at a recent city council meeting that there were 0 in 2007. Should you pass some of the funds tonight, this would set precedents and really open up the floodgates for any organization in the city who can creatively fathom a fund request. The Massachusetts Department of Revenue is clear and stands very firm against the creation of these types of funds. These funds circumvent this council's authority by transferring the discretion of spending to organizations. This is not what the voting public intended to happen when they approved the CPA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy.
Yep.
Alan Verson.
Hello. My name is Alan Verson. I'd like to express my opinion about the CPA. I don't want to speak in favor of or in opposition to any particular application that will be before you, but about the CPA in general at this point in time. I thought it was a fine idea when it was passed. I voted for it. As a matter of fact, I even ran for one of the positions, one of the board positions on the committee. I was trounced so badly that it brought an abrupt end to my promising political career. But I think at this point in time, I would suggest that some thought and discussion needs to be given whether it's appropriate to still have it on the books. Clearly, I don't need to tell this body about the enormous financial pressure that the city is under. Core functions are being threatened, cut back, eliminated, and the applications to the CPC, or now to the council for funding, are for things that, well, they seem like good ideas, some more so than others, are somewhat more marginal and questionable than the core functions of the city that are being threatened. There are things that probably wouldn't be funded by the council out of its general taxpayer revenue. Now, I understand, of course, that the CPA, the statute prohibits use of the money for anything but the 4 subjects specified in the statute, and that's exactly the problem. Taxpayer money is being used, and it's real taxpayer money that we all pay, of course, for things that might not otherwise be funded. And I suggest that it's appropriate at this point in time to have some discussion about either repealing it or, in the alternative, cutting it back to 1%. I don't know from a statutory point of view what's required to do either of those, but they are possible. The other problem, as I'm sure this board knows, is that the state either already has or is expected to cut back its reimbursement. So it's going to be far more just the city money. And each of these applications, the subject for which the money would be spent needs to be weighed against the functions of the city that are being threatened or eliminated. So I just suggest that the whole subject needs re-examination. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lachlan Fedora.
Hi, I'm Lil Fedora, and I live at 238 Glendale Road. And I just want to bring this to everyone's attention within the city that our mayor is willing to spend millions and millions of dollars on expanding a landfill. Now, there are options like going to zero waste. Now, if we go to zero waste, that means it's going to reduce the amount of trash that will be going into the landfill. However, it appears really that the city does want to stay in the landfill business because it currently now takes in 50,000 tons a year to be able to operate this landfill. Now, if we do the right thing and the green thing and we start to recycle more and we start gearing ourselves to zero waste, that's going to reduce the 50,000 tons. Yet the city still wants to spend millions of dollars. So does that mean the city would bring in more towns to be able to fulfill that 50,000 tons? Aren't we trying to reduce waste? Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian. Linda Heisinger.
Linda Ziegler, Park Hill Road, Florence. I'm here to say two things. One is I was at the Board of Public Works meeting when they brought up the Marble Brook, and the Board of Public Works voted in favor of giving $33,000 to preserve the Marble Brook, which is, from what I understand, Northampton's backup water supply. So bravo, I think that's a wonderful thing. It's a very green thing. However, Northampton has polluted the Hannibrook, which is East Hampton's backup water supply. See, the Hannibrook is 2 miles down the road in the other America, where the social injustice is going on and the contamination is going on. So you see, 2 miles up the road, we are willing to spend money and preserve that land. 2 miles down the road in the other America, a less affluent area, it's our right to contaminate East Hampton's water supply. Years from now, the residents of this city and our children will be paying for that, okay? Because it will be, the city will be sued by East Hampton someday and Southampton, which is growing. The other thing I want to do is invite everyone on the television and the councilors, the mayor, to a DEP meeting that is happening for the general public. The Board of Public Works mentioned that they may go, or they're probably going. It's on Tuesday, January 6th at the Holyoke Community College, the Kittredge Center. It's from 6 to 9. And the DEP Solid Waste Master Plan is going to be discussed, and they're going to seek input from the audience. They're going all around the state and setting up these meetings, and they're coming from Boston, the head of the DEP. And the reason they're doing this is to help them identify and accomplish goals. And they're having 6 public meetings across the state. They want to hear from citizens, businesses, municipal officers, and other stakeholders about best ideas for accomplishing goals for solid waste in the short and long run. This is not about the landfill expansion. This is about the environment and solid waste in general. So the councilors can go to this, and certainly if you're going to be voting on something, you should be going to this. Okay, you have a responsibility. They're going to be asking questions about how they can collectively shift from a waste management to a materials management system. How they can work with product manufacturers, distributors, and retailers to prevent waste from being generated in the first place. They want to talk about how they can increase the amount of waste being reused, recycled, and composted. This is on the DEP website. And if you go to our website, Citizens United, www.savingparadise.info, and click on the events tab, there's a link to the DEP website. So
30 seconds.
it would be great if you could all attend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David Rackow.
Good, thank you. First, I want to say that I agree that the DEP program that Linda just spoke about is a very worthwhile event, and I'm going to try and be there myself, and I encourage you all to attend as well. But that's not primarily why I'm here tonight. I wanted to just offer my support as chair of the Board of Public Works for the Marble Brook project that I just spoke about. I can't really add too much more to what Adele has already said, except to say that we in the board, and many of you are very much aware of this, are concerned about the long-term water supply for Northampton. We want to look ahead to the next 100 years. And clearly water demand is quite likely to go up as it has for the past 100 years. And so we want to look to other possible sources. It's only prudent that we plan, and one of those is, of course, the Roberts Meadow Reservoir and the Roberts Meadow watershed that the Marble Brook project is within. And so I think this is a very good project. It's something that is forward thinking. It fits in well with our mission, and we are already maintaining land in that watershed that's adjacent to Marble Brook. So I offer my support, as does the entire Board of Public Works.
Thank you, David. Joanne Campbell.
Joanne Campbell, Executive Director, Valley Community Development Corporation, also a citizen of Northampton. As you know, we have a couple of projects before the City Council today that are coming through recommendations from the Community Preservation Committee. And just want to make a couple of points. One is on the 16 North Maple project that was completed originally in 1992. There's been some numbers swirling around. We received $95,000 through the city's Community Development Block Grant Program. And we borrowed $376,000 from what originally was the government land bank, which became Mass Development. So that is an amortizing loan that we've been paying off to Mass Development. So the total development cost was $471,000, and the total construction costs were $233,563. Second point is that Valley CDC does need on all its affordable housing projects a local match in order to be competitive at the state level. So that's why we're looking for CPA funding. And thirdly, I just wanted to correct Kathy Silver's comment that Valley, as a nonprofit, when it develops its affordable housing projects, sells these projects to a for-profit entity. We do sell the projects for $1. It's really a transfer to an LLC, a limited liability company that continues to be a nonprofit because Valley owns either 100% or 99%. We might have a small partner, which is another nonprofit, in the deal, and these projects are required to be single-purpose entities, the ownership structure. It's required by the state, so anyone can look at our financial statements. We have an audit every year. We get the most stringent audit, unified single audit that's required, and it shows consolidated statements, and all those properties are listed as Valley CDC properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat McCarthy.
Good evening, my name is Pat McCarthy. I work at Valley CDC, 30 Market Street, Northampton. I'm here obviously to support our projects both at King Street and on Maple Street in Northampton, as well as our pre-development loan fund. I wanted to take an aerial view of the discussion over the amount of money being spent regarding taxpayers' money. And I just wanted to read this. The rough national affordable housing community development budget is $57 billion, and we're talking on a national level. While substantial, it pales in comparison to $123.2 billion in estimated 2008 federal tax expenditures that predominantly served non-low-income homeowners. Compared to middle and upper-income households, lower-income families received a much smaller share of these homeowner benefits, which include lost revenues of $79.9 billion for mortgage interest deductions on owner-occupied residents, $14.3 billion for property tax deduction on owner-occupied residents, and $29 billion for the exclusion of capital gains on sales of principal residence, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation estimates of the federal tax expenditures for fiscal year 2000 to 2011. And I say this for the reason that the SRO housing is going to serve those individuals serving less than 50% of the area's median income, and a large proportion are less than 30% of the median income. And they fall into this category of the $57 billion, which is actually only 31% of the total 180. And the 68, there's 68.4% of that total that goes towards home ownership. So it's that lower end that these types of units are going to serve. The other thing I'd like to speak briefly to is just that, I've been in construction since '89. I've worked at Valley since 2000. And since 2000, I've seen square foot costs go from anywhere from $90 a square foot or $110 in 2000 to $190, which is a 73% increase. And that's reflected in our budget. And it's also reflected in the two projects that we just finished. And the last point,
You have 30 seconds.
the last point is that both projects pretty much leverage 90% of the total development cost from outside sources, which is taxpayers' money. but that taxpayers' money will be spent locally. Every $1 spent locally will produce $3 of economic development locally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amy Bookbinder?
Hi, I live at 88 Grove Avenue in Leeds. And I just wanted to say before I begin my remarks that I didn't come here to speak about the aquifer, the landfill, but I do want to acknowledge the efforts of the people who've spoken about that to keep us all safe. I am here to speak in support of your approval tonight of CPC funding for the David Ruggles Center. I believe that the CPC money will be put to very good use here in funding what I am certain will become an exciting and important museum and educational center for adults and children, hopefully for generations to come, which will bring knowledge about the wonderful legacy of Florence and the abolitionist community it hosted, stimulate more research on this important community, and as the Sojourner Truth statue and tours have done, will inspire further study of social justice movements and social justice work itself. This project couldn't have been launched in a better way or at a better time in our community and in our country. The committee, a diverse group of people, came together to save the house at 225 Nonotuck Street in Florence from demolition because of its significance historically as representative of houses that were part of the Underground Railroad network in Florence. This committee included the owner of the house and the property, who had other plans for the property but came to realize its historical importance and listened to those of us who had concerns about his plans for the property. Together, we've come up with a plan that meets his needs and will serve the public good now and I hope for future generations. Not only have we saved the house, but we're going to have an exciting museum and education center with his help and I hope with yours. I think this is a stunning example of how people can come together for a common purpose, including developers and members of the community. That in itself brings something very positive to our community. Secondly, given the historic election of our country's first black president, such a museum and education center will stand as a celebration of this, and how we've all come to this great day together. As we all know, it took a very long time and many, many people to reach this day. And those who moved to Florence, including Sojourner Truth, William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, and David Ruggles, and those who lived here in Florence, supported them, almost done, in their efforts to abolish slavery, played a major role in bringing us here. The work for equal rights isn't finished, but the more we understand about our past and learn about those who came before us in the struggle for equal rights, the more inspired to continue this important work we will be. I want to just quickly end by saying this. I want to thank the CPC for recognizing this and funding the David Ruggles Center. And I'm going to make a bit of history myself now, because I don't think I'm known for doing this, but I really want to thank the developer that we worked with on this property. And I also want to thank the members of the David Ruggles Committee who did far more work than I did on this.
Your time is up.
And I want to, with my fingers crossed, thank you in advance for also supporting this.
Thank you. Scott Wilhelm, is it?
Hello, my name is Scott Williams. I live at 71 State Street, Northampton. I'm here in support of Valley CDC and the funding that they're requesting because I was a tenant of theirs recently, and they were there for me when I needed it, and I've since moved on to more permanent housing, but the program was excellent, and I talked with a few other people that I know that have been able to use it as more or less as transitional housing, and it was just a great thing to have at the time, and the funding would be just very important, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Darrell LaFleur.
Counselor, I brought my own timer. Daryl G. LaFleur, 244 South Street. I oppose the use of CPA funds to create or deposit monies into existing reserve accounts. If you approve the CDC and CONSCOM applications for reserve funds, there may be pressure for you to approve other similar requests. In my view, the discretion to expend CPA funds should remain with the council proper, as that is where the public accountability is. That said, the council meets for most of the year every 2 weeks, and I'm confident that some alternate mechanism can be established that would allow for the timely disbursement of CPA monies to solve the lag problem. I urge you to vote no on requests for reserve funds of this nature and to work toward finding another solution. Regarding the SRO applications before you tonight, I urge you to not take a second reading so that the public has an opportunity to weigh in on the conversation that is to transpire later this evening. There has been very little information made available to the general public regarding these proposals, and while I'm neither opposed nor in support of these applications, I presently have some concerns, and others might arise based on your conversation that is yet to take place. For instance, I requested information from CPC Chair Jack Horner, who I see here this evening, via email regarding the CDC applications on December 10th, asking specifically if there was any other background information besides what is posted on the city website. Mr. Horner provided me with a little, giving no indication that there was other information available. However, the draft minutes of the CPC meeting of December 3rd, which are not available online until December 15th, indicate the following. Valley CDC, King Street SRO, item 4. Jack Horner stated Joanne Campbell wrote a letter describing how much it costs to develop affordable community housing. He would forward this letter to the city council, end quote. Well, this might seem like a trivial matter. To me, this letter constitutes background information. That's what I was requesting. But Mr. Horner opted not to forward it to me. Obviously, he felt it important for you all to consider this information in making your determination tonight, and frankly, I'm disappointed that he failed to provide it for me also. Another concern, as the sand is going through the glass, how will these buildings be maintained and what is the budget for that maintenance? The North Maple Street building in Florence had $750,000, and I will defer to Joanne's numbers. Invested in it 16 years ago, and today it is assessed for less than half of that value and is in need of about $2 million in upgrades. We all know that constructing or rehabilitating a building is only part of its fiscal equation. After construction, the buildings will need to be maintained, and that information is not included in the application. And I have a few other comments that I handed out that go along with this, but my time is out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and he's provided the councilors with a letter outlining his information. And David Corbett.
Evening. I want to just talk about the dump a little bit out there. Lately, you've been here reading in the paper a little bit how people are going for zero waste. Well, at a meeting a little while ago up at JFK, I asked the coordinator, the solid waste coordinator, if there wasn't any technology to improve on what goes in that dump to recycle it. And the response was, this is the cleanest dump I've ever been in, or landfill, whatever it is. You know, it's hard to believe that there's not the technology out there when you look at TV and there's a commercial saying, we recycle all our roofing materials that we take down. Yeah, and here we bury it. You could still collect the fees, put it in a barrel, and bring it down for recycling. Same thing with asphalt. Bring asphalt there, we're going to charge you to bury it. But if you take it to place Z, they'll take it for nothing and be happy to get it because they recycle it. You bring your plastic bags at the dump, you bury it. Stop and Shop, the big Y, what do? They reuse it, recycle it. You know, you have some community block grant money here. I mean, not community, but Community Preservation Act money. You have a wonderful college in town. Why don't you use some of that money for seed to solve our problem, to get rid of the waste? Extend the landfill. Don't be arguing about not developing or enlarging or cutting down. Another thing, another subject, I'm proud of my friend, I'll call her M. We ended up getting a boiler put in her house. She went from about 35% efficient up into the 80%. Now, years ago, the Hampshire County Action Commission had a program geared toward people saving on energy. They gave landlords a break. If you had, in my mother's case, 2/3 of the house was affordable housing. That's what it was in Northampton years ago. Private property owners taking affordable housing on. Anyway, she got the whole house insulated for free. Is that another program or a way that the CPA money could go to get people so that they can afford to stay in their house or their apartments? Got to give a little bit to these landlords so that they can let the people stay there. With the Hampshire County Action Commission, it was a guarantee you wouldn't go up on the rent in a year. But there's ways, you know, $400 and something thousand, you could probably put 40 boilers in. You know, give these people a break. You're talking about an override. The apartment dwellers, the ones that are, there are still some out there paying $200, $300 a month, believe it or not, because the old landlords, that's the way it was. Murphy knows that, I believe, Councilor Murphy. So there's something to think about before you start shelling out all that money. And we also have Northampton Housing Authority. Couldn't they share some of that money? I mean, they work really well in the city for so long. Let them expand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And with that, I will ask the mayor to come up and resume her seat. She snuck into the back earlier.
So we have a number of things in finance. I just want to make sure what all we have in finance. All these Community Preservation Act. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, well, let's start with a quick budget update and then we'll go into the council orders, okay? So I told you that we would start each Finance Committee meeting with a sort of where we are. We haven't gotten any more news about next year, and we're still working on figuring out our own internal numbers, and we may have more to report to you in January. But I want to give you an update about where we are this year. You may have read in the newspaper that East Hampton had to make some cuts mid-year this year based on excise tax receipts. We were very cautious this year. Mr. Pyle, do you want to speak to that excise tax issue?
We level funded our excise tax from 2 years ago, basically, is what I did for FY09, because I anticipated that we weren't going to be getting any kind of revenue from that, because nobody's buying new cars. Through November, our receipts were within $30,000 of our through November receipts of last year. But the real key on motor vehicle excise is going to be in February when we get our commitment for FY09. That's when we'll really see whether we're going to hit even the level funded of 2 years ago mark, and we'll be looking forward to seeing what that is.
So we'll let you know in February where that number is. Okay, questions about that? The other issue that we had mentioned to you is investment income, the interest on the any of the taxes or other revenue that we collect or we have in the bank, and
right.
speak to that.
I reduced my anticipated revenue from investment income for fiscal '09 by 15%. I'm sorry to say that through November, our investment income is down 57% from last year. We've taken in 99,000 through November. Last year, we had taken in 230,000 through November. So there's definitely, that's going to be a problem area for us for the rest of the year. No two ways about it. Fortunately, it's by cutting it by 15%, we're at less than $500,000 of my revenue is based on investment income. So the impact of this, although it's going to be something, it's not going to be a major issue on $67 million. But it is something that we are going to have to absorb somewhere else. We're going to have to either make it up in other revenues, or we're going to have to make it up by savings in departmental accounts.
Council Reckman and then Council Spector.
Roughly the same amount of money, we're simply making less interest on the money we have.
We're definitely making less interest on the money, that's for sure. We actually do have less money this year than we did last year. Both of those things, it's kind of a perfect storm coming at us, yes.
Just a general, not any detail thing, but where do we invest? Where do we have our investments? What kind of?
I would need to have the treasurer talk to you about that.
Okay.
We have them invested in a variety of different places. All of it is in short-term stuff. Hardly any. I don't believe any of it is in equity because we're not allowed to by Mass General laws.
Remember last year you passed a home rule petition to allow us to invest under what's called the prudent person rule, as opposed to investing from the list that the state gave.
Oh, right.
And we were given permission to do that, and George Zimmerman, the city treasurer, is very careful about where he is investing. And yes, our numbers are down, but I think across the country and across the world that there are problems. So
at least our money is safe.
Right.
We may not be getting the kind of money we were getting, but it is definitely safe.
You don't have it in a hedge fund.
No.
Thank you.
No.
We did have a tiny sprinkle of good news. We've been talking to Tony Patillo from the building commissioner's office, and we're about only down on permits by about 1%, which is pretty remarkable given what the climate is out there. And actually, residential permits are down a little bit, but commercial permits are actually up a little bit from where we had expected them to be. And the values track with last year relatively closely.
Yes.
And that was what was put in that was what was expected.
Right, this is against what we projected.
Yes, fortunately, we are on target, actually, with our permits, which is really a good thing.
That was a place where we thought we'd see a big problem, and we're not seeing that.
Good.
And that also means that there's some new growth for next year, because many of those permits tie into new growth for next year. And finally, the quarterly tax bills will go out at the end of this month, and they'll be due February 1st.
That's just to let everybody at home know. Our quarterly tax bills will go out on time. We've had our tax rates certified, and the bills will be going out the end of December, and the due date will be February 1st. And that's more to do with cash flow than anything else.
So the other thing I asked Mr. Pyle to update you about is the retirement fund. As you know, city employees pay a certain percentage into the retirement fund every year, and how much they paid is dependent on when they were hired. So people who were hired when Jim was hired paid how much, Jim?
5%.
5%.
I'm 7.
And then our new hires are mostly paying 9 or 11. No, teachers are 11, but most of our general fund employees are paying 9, right?
Yeah.
And the teachers agreed to go to 11 in order to fund the early retirement program. So so that money goes into our retirement fund, and we're under an obligation with the state to be fully funded by 2028. And that is invested by our retirement board. So I asked Mr. Pyle to just update you where we think we are today, and we'll have a better sense. But he's going to tell you where we think we are today.
Yeah, the retirement fund, the 2028 figure is what the key issue here is. We are required every 2 years to get an actuarial basis recertified every 2 years for how much needs to be put aside into the retirement fund in order for us to be fully funded by 2028. Last year, the year ended December 31st, 2007, Our Northampton retirement system, we had a good year. We beat a lot of the averages. We were quite pleased. We ended up being third in the state. We even beat the state retirement system. So we went off cycle and got ourselves a new actuarial report based on last December 31st because we wanted to lock in that good performance. And I'm glad we did, actually, because it's going to give us 2 years before we have to get our actual rate done again, and that will give us 2 years to hopefully get through this absolutely disastrous quarter that's going on since September. This fourth quarter for this fiscal year, their calendar year, is just disastrous across all retirement systems in the United States. The Massachusetts state retirement system is looking at being down about 30% at this point. I'm anticipating, I don't know yet, but I'm anticipating that we're going to be down anywhere between 20 and 30% ourselves. Our invested total net assets at this point is about $71 million. We were, as of last December, we were 66% funded on our retirement plan. If we are down 20%, that's 1.4 million reduction in our funded assets. That's possible. I anticipate that, let me put it that way. I'm anticipating a minimum of 20%, if not more. I'll know better by the end of January what we are because we will get our fourth quarter reports at the retirement board in the third week of January. So I'll certainly let you know our first meeting in February where the retirement board is as of the end of calendar 2008. But everybody should know that regardless of what our fund does over the short term, this is a long-term issue, and we are still being actuarially reset every 2 years to make 2028. What that means for the city is that the city's contribution to the retirement fund may go up to make up for those losses, but they will still be spread over the next 20 years. So if we see an increase, it will be an increase, but it won't be a disastrous increase because we also do asset smoothing. That's what it's called, asset smoothing. So we take a 3-year rolling average of how we're doing, and we take that into account when we set the actuarial rate, and so that'll come into play as well. So yes.
Hasn't the state said something about pushing off that date for total funding?
I haven't heard that.
There's been some discussion at the state level about giving it 2 or 3 more years, but for the state, and I'm not sure whether or not that discussion is reaching down yet totally to the local governments. And that's a mixed bag. On one hand, it gives us more time. On the other hand, we might as well just try to get it fully funded, right? And the other thing that I've been talking to Mr. Pyle about, and he pointed out to me, is that remember that city employees don't pay into Social Security, so they don't pay into Social Security, and we don't pay the employer match, right? So if we were to shift everybody to Social Security tomorrow, it would actually probably be more expensive for us than the system that we have right now. The way it's set up right now, the employees pay in their share whatever they were set to pay whenever they were hired, and we are in essence making up the difference. We would be paying more if we had to pay it on a Social Security basis. So, well, sometimes people look at public employee pensions and think, boy, that's really killing the public sector. I'm not sure in this case that it is, number one. And number two, the average benefit for statewide for a public pensioner is about $26,000 a year, which is not particularly lucrative either. So it's just important to keep it kind of right-sized. Yeah.
You mentioned the possible increase in employee percentage with that rate. What would be the?
No, there's no proposal to increase the employee percentage.
Okay, what was it then, Chris?
Employee percentages are set by law. The only thing that potentially could change, would be if the state extended the time period from 2028 to say 2038. I mean,
so
if they added 10 years.
The increased contribution that you mentioned.
Oh, the increased contribution would be
Yes,
because the
you.
next time we get our actuarial rate study done in 2 years, if our if our total funded net assets have dropped down because of losses, because of market losses, then the city's contribution would go up
Got it.
in order to still stay on the 2028 schedule. Because instead of being 66% funded, which we are now, if we drop that back to 64%, that means we have to get ourselves back up there again to still hit 2028. We're still required to be fully funded by 2028. And I guess that's the key thing to get through to, certainly to anybody who's an employee or a current retiree. The plan is still funded. It is still on track to be fully funded by 2028. We don't have a problem there. It's just a question of how do we get by this definitely rough period here right now with the markets being what they are.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only increase that public employees were looking at was an increase in the base of the amount of money that they would get, a 3%, for instance.
And that's going nowhere either.
Yeah, but that,
Why don't you explain to people about?
well,
Yeah.
if we get a 3% raise as a retiree, it's 3% on the first $12,000, and that's it. If you were making $24,000 in retirement, you still only get it on 12. They were talking about, the legislature was talking about raising that base to $20,000.
16 actually.
Or 16, and that did not go through. So, but that was the only talk about raising.
Right, that's another thing about being a municipal or a state retiree is that the COLAs are certainly nothing like what they do for Social Security. You're going to get, the best you can ever get is 3% on $12,000, which is $360. So it's $1 a day. That's all you're ever going to get.
So we'll keep bringing you fund budget facts. Those are the ones we had for today, okay? And actually, the pension piece is going to be important on going forward, and we'll keep you up to date on the revenue side, you know, as we know things. Okay, so we have a number of things that need to be voted on in finance, and the first is upon the recommendation of the Mayor and Finance Committee ordered that the sum of $80,000 being hereby is transferred from the stabilization fund to Veteran Services Benefits.
Move approval.
Second, is there a second?
Second.
Yep.
Steve Connor got tied up in traffic in Boston today. He was down doing the testifying, and just to say, I had hoped at the time that we did the transfer back in, I believe it was October, that we would put enough money in there to get us through November, which we actually did. However, we're not at a point where we're going to have free cash certified by the end of November. The audit team.
Since the end of November's already gone.
The end of November's gone. The audit team has done their work, but we have not yet submitted the paperwork down to the Department of Revenue. They're just finishing their work actually tomorrow. We haven't submitted the paperwork to DOR yet to get our free cash certified, so we're still needed to go to the stabilization fund. This $80,000 will get us through to the second week of February, or to the midpoint of February, let me put it that way. And it's necessary, I wish Steve was here, he could speak to how many people we have on our rolls right now, but it's more than we had last year.
Do you want to mention?
I don't understand what you just said, how many on what?
Do you want to?
How many people are currently
Veterans benefits.
on getting veterans benefits on a given month? Steve would be able to speak to that, I can't. No, okay.
No, okay.
But the need is out there. There's definitely, you know, we have a war, we have people at the VA hospital, and we have people living here in the city, and they are entitled to these benefits because the state gives them to them.
I know he keeps telling us at our meetings that the increasing in his office is rising constantly.
I just want to correct the minutes there. You'll have to get someone else from, I jumped the gun and seconded that motion, not being in.
I'll second.
So,
Mr. Murphy,
thank
second.
you.
And just to remind people, this is reimbursed 75%, but we don't get it till next year. So, anybody else? You ready to vote on this in finance? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next is upon recommendation of the Mayor and Finance Committee, order that the sum of $7,452 Be and hereby is transferred from the parking meter reserve fund to the parking division capital lease litter vacuum account. Is there a second?
Second.
There was an attachment with this that you'll notice. What this does is it's a one-time payment that allows us to buy out the lease on our downtown litter vacuum. It's this incredible machine. They drive down. They got these arms that go. It's
the Dr. Seuss.
Yes, or Doc Ock with Spider-Man. It's these arms that suck up all the trash. At any rate, this is a good deal. We've had this machine for 5 years now. It's still just trucking along. It's in good shape. This is an opportunity, I think, for us to just own the equipment outright. This is the first opportunity on the lease payments for us to do this. So at the recommendation of our parking czar, I'm bringing this forward to you this evening.
Any questions? Yeah.
The finance director seems really excited about this. Has he ever been afforded the chance to drive this machine?
I only observe.
I'm thinking we might need to let
I
him.
think they might need to address that.
It's cool.
We may, I want to ask the finance
If I was
director,
ever going to be a trash collector, this is the kind of machine I'd like to drive.
there is a date on the invoice. Do they need to receive the money by tomorrow?
They do not need to receive the money by tomorrow, even though it says 12/19. I've been assured by our parking director that he's been in contact with them, and he thinks that they will be amenable to whatever we can come up with. It would be better sooner than later, let's put it that way. And certainly, I will say, and I should have said it when we were still on the Veterans Services, if we could have 2 votes on them, since you will not be meeting until the 15th of January. I'm afraid that these 2 items can't wait until the 15th of January. I apologize for that.
Ready to vote on that? Finance, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Next to, yeah. Next are the set of community preservation requests, and the chair of the committee is here, so.
May I recognize Jack Horner, please?
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'm gonna read them, well, let's have Jack do his presentation, then we'll go through the votes. How's that? Does that make sense to folks?
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Jack Horner, 46 Lady Slipper Lane, Chair of the Community Preservation Committee, and I appreciate you giving me your time tonight. I don't really have a long presentation to make. Can I just ask, are we likely to have 2 discussions, one during finance and one during full council? I know some of these projects are controversial, so I'm planning on staying. But
Typically, everybody can speak during finance. I'm assuming they will, and then I'll ask them if they want to stay. Okay.
I think I need to stay anyway, so I just to be safe. I sent all of you a memo, and the memo outlines the projects. I think I will just make a couple of quick comments in response to our procedure. Kathy Silva raised a question about how independent we were, and because several of us had acknowledged being connected to different groups. That's actually a disclosure practice, which we think is a best practice, which Bruce Young and I decided we'd bring to the committee, and the committee said it was a good idea. So we think disclosing when committee members are members of an organization that are getting funding is a good thing, not a bad thing. So I think I just want to make that point. Just briefly to remind counselors and for the information of others here and who may be watching. To date, through the first 2 rounds, 58.7% of CPA funds have been spent on historic preservation, 18.9% on affordable housing, 21.1% on open space, and 1.4% on recreation. So far, historic preservation's got more than half, and affordable housing and open space are at around 20% each. And recreation, which we've had very few applications for, has really had almost nothing. I would rather, I think, than go over what I've already written, make myself available to answer questions. I will say that the committee, as always, had a lengthy and thorough process, including site visits, reviewing of applications, We put questions and comments together, sent them to applicants, requested those in return. Every applicant came to one of our meetings for a face-to-face discussion. We had a discussion of the projects, then we ranked them, and then we had a further discussion and voted on our recommendations. As always, our minutes are posted very, very quickly on our website. Our minutes are extensive. I think probably the most extensive minutes of any committee in the city. And I guess I'll just conclude in terms of process by saying that earlier this year, when we were sent the questionnaire from the Best Practices Committee, I was able to fill it out in the affirmative for every practice that was listed. So we feel pretty good about our process, and I'm happy to answer questions when and if they arise.
Do you want to move any of these, or do you want to ask some general questions on the process and then move the, so go ahead, yeah.
Oh, just a quick question. You mentioned those ratios between affordable housing, open space, and historical preservation. And that's really helpful. Did you crunch those numbers for how that ratio would change? Were all these proposals to be funded tonight? I mean, I know we can probably do that whether.
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't. Okay. And I hope everyone has the memo I wrote, because attached as the last page was this. Yours probably doesn't have the yellow the way mine does, but that lists all of the projects that you've approved to date. So I don't know what tonight's recommendations have acted on.
Okay,
but obviously they would increase affordable housing.
Affordable housing.
Especially, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Murphy, you keep your hand up?
Yes.
You did.
I'm in finance. I think the discussion is at the council level where we can all participate. So while I have issues with some of these, I want to bring them at the council level. I'm prepared to move them all to council so everybody can participate in that discussion.
Well, that's a question. Do you want to just move them as a group and then take them up
I
to
would
council?
move them as a group so that we can all participate in the discussion. I think that's the intent. We're all supposed to participate.
So a motion's been made and seconded to move them as a group. And Councilor Mary Labarge, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just have some concerns here, Jack. Each one of us councilors received from Darryl LaFleur, and I know you were here, you heard him speak. Maybe you could give me a little information on what he had stated, that he apparently had emailed you in regarding the CDC applications on December 10th, asking you specifically if there was any other background information. You heard him say that. Can you speak up about that, Jack?
Sure. And I perhaps was a little derelict in not sending that to Darryl, but that memo was only completed on Monday. And I have to say, between the time I had emailed Darryl and the time the memo was completed, to be honest, I'd forgotten about his request. But I have to say, it also didn't occur to me to take a memo that I was mailing to the city council and send it to other people. It's a matter of the public record, and I've already made a note that, to send that to Darryl when I get home.
I want to thank you for what you did, Jack, by emailing every one of us councilors with that information.
Can I also address one of Darryl's other points? Darryl said he hoped that there would be only one reading tonight. I want to say that the committee has always anticipated that there would only be a first reading tonight, and that the second reading would be in January.
Okay, so, yeah.
Jack, a couple of questions about process that you may have given us this information in the past, but I need a refresher. In terms of projects, do you put out like priorities, or do you give people ideas? Is it more or less a blank slate and people come forward? Because you mentioned that you have not had, for example, a number of projects around recreation. So do you just wait to see what comes to you, or are you sometimes proactive in putting out ideas of what you're looking for?
The committee, when it wrote its first community preservation plan a year ago, reserved the right to be proactive, but in the plan stated that we felt that the better process was simply to see what comes in. We didn't want to be highly proactive. We didn't want to be seen as controlling where the money is spent too much. And I think that if we were to go out and say, boy, we think this is an important project, and when anybody please give us an application, I think that right away starts to really set the agenda, and we felt that it would be more appropriate for the community and broad-based nature of the CPA simply to put the plan together, explain things as well as we could, and then see what comes in and do our best job in reviewing them.
Now you're at the point of finishing the third round of funding. Is there any thought of stepping back and looking at the total picture and see if there's a need to reassess that, for example, around recreation, to see if all the areas are being thoroughly addressed, or do you think that this is a practice that is serving us well?
I think that it is serving us well so far. To be honest, I'm not sure how many people know that CPA funding is available for certain things, and we continue to try to improve our outreach into the community on that. I will take that back to the committee as a question, though, whether we ought to do that. And let me say, because we just voted last night, just as an FYI to you, that last night the committee elected Fran Volkman as chair for next year and Tom Parent as vice chair. So I'll bring that question to Fran.
One more quick question.
Was Council Bryson done?
I'm sorry.
No,
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify, just because Councilor Barsley brought up about the recreation piece. The law says 10% must be set aside for those three categories. Is there also a mandate for the recreation category? No, I didn't think so.
No.
So that's something that,
Recreation is allowable, but not
Okay.
required.
thanks.
Council Bryson?
In terms of the money that has been allotted for the proposals coming before us, is there a timeline by which they need to be passed? If any of these are delayed, is there a potential problem?
No.
And if any of them are also are not passed, does that money sit there for the next round, or is there a chance that money is lost?
No, the CPA money is not lost. If you don't appropriate it, it stays in our accounts. And not only are there, as far as we know, no incredibly time-sensitive applications, but one of the things we've learned during the year is that not only our own committee process, but the process of going through council and then crafting grant agreements and getting those approved is a lengthy one. And so, on my instruction, Bruce Young, as he sends letters out to people, and every letter says, please be aware that the CPA process is lengthy, and please plan for that, and we hope that's a useful thing to tell people.
Okay, are you ready to move these forward?
Mm-hmm.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So now those will come back later in your.
Exactly. Okay, you knew you were staying, yeah. I think that's it for finance, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn
Mayor?
finance. Oh,
There's a resolution, which, do we need to bring that up in finance?
Oh, good question. Yeah,
South
I think
Street?
we do. Yeah, I think we do, sorry.
Right, city
You're right.
property.
Because finance is acting as city property, thanks for catching that. This is upon the recommendation of Councilor David Narkowitz, be it resolved that resolution of South Street School use, whereas in 1997, following an extensive public reuse process, it was determined that the most appropriate disposition of the South Street School building located at 139 South Street, Northampton, Massachusetts, was leasing the facility, and whereas on October 11, 2007, the Northampton School Committee voted to confirm that the building formerly known as the South Street School is no longer needed by the school department for current or future educational purposes, and whereas the continued lease of the property for the purpose of music education is an appropriate neighborhood use that enhances educational opportunities available to the citizens of Northampton and the Pioneer Valley, and whereas Mass General Law, Chapter 30B, Section 16 requires a vote of the City Council to surplus any interest in public property prior to its disposition. Now therefore be it resolved, upon the conclusion of current lease to the Northampton Community Music Center, Inc., the property formerly known as the South Street School is available for lease until 2025, and the City Council directs the mayor to award and execute said lease with the following restrictions. The lessee will be responsible for repairing and maintaining all interior and exterior fixtures and structures, including but not limited to the parking lot and retaining walls. The property can only be used for musical education by a 501c3 nonprofit organization, except subleases may be in the discretion of the Finance Committee be approved for educational purposes only. So we need a motion to approve.
So, second.
Motion's been made and seconded. So this extends the South Street School lease till 2025, and they will take responsibility for anything having to do with the building and really the property as well, parking lot and retaining walls. And is there anything else anything you need to add there? Or should
No, I think most counselors, a lot of counselors have visited the site and seen the work that the center has done in terms of the upgrades they've done to the building. They've been good stewards of the building, and there's this other capital issue that's arisen, which is not part of the building and not required under their lease, and that's the parking lot and retaining walls, which need to be addressed. And they're prepared to address that, though it is the city's responsibility under the current lease. And so by allowing for a lease extension, they will be able to take on that capital project as part of the other ones that they've done at the facility.
Mayor, wasn't there a time when they thought about buying that building?
I think they have, but I think right now, given the financial climate, I think they're more comfortable with the extension of the lease. And my understanding is we would have to RFP this. Is that correct, Councilor Markowitz?
Yeah.
We would RFP this sooner rather than later and just extend the lease upon.
Yeah, and effectively that's what will happen with this with
Right.
what we're passing tonight. It'll be very similar to what we did recently with the Survival Center, where a lease is coming to a close and we are effectively RFPing it, but we're putting very specific restrictions on the RFP.
Put that to bid. Anybody who wants to run a music school there can do that.
But they also
Take responsibility for the
yes, and the Community Music Center would continue to lease the building
till the end of
to the end of their current lease. So there's again very similar to the Survival Center structure. I did, yeah. No, I'm happy, if that is their choice, I'm happy to extend their lease, though extending their lease would have an effect on the value of the building. So while they have chosen to extend the lease, and I'm happy to do that because that's their choice, I would be reluctant to sell it to them during the term of the lease because it's going to affect the ultimate value of the building. So that being said, I'm happy to do it because that's the way they want to address the problem. And there was, and as members of finance know, there was discussion. They did investigate that as an option versus extending the lease. But as the mayor said, that this was the most efficacious way for them financially to be able to do the projects that they wanted to do at the site. And they do provide a good and valuable service to the city. And if this is their choice, I'm happy to accommodate them.
Councilor?
We had the same problem with Main Street, and we decided to advertise it for sale. Then you back and forth, see where you don't have to sell it, but you know what the actual value is, and you break yourself completely of it. I would like to see them advertise it for sale. And what happened at William Street, they got a lot more money than they anticipated to get it off their back.
Yeah, I think the dilemma about advertising it for sale right now is that there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the retaining wall, and there's a lease in place for a number of years, which reduces the value of the building. If we take care of this lease and extend it, whoever gets the lease will have to fix the building. So I think that's to our benefit. But I hear what you're saying.
The wall is a lot of problem there.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's very conservative estimates say it's $150,000 to $200,000 project to repair that retaining or make sure that the retaining wall doesn't move any further than it has.
Yeah. Yeah. Ready to vote in finance? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now a motion to adjourn. Finance is
So move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is, we'll ask the clerk to call the roll of the regular meeting.
Counselor Parsley?
Present.
Counselor Carney? Present. Counselor Dossel?
Here.
Counselor Marianne Labarge?
Here.
Counselor Raymond Labarge?
Here.
Counselor Murphy? Counselor Narcoitz?
Present.
Counselor Reckman? Counselor Spector?
Here.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve the minutes of December 4th, 2008.
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
Counselor?
Just one correction, in the vote to vote me off the island, I didn't vote in favor.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Back on the
I'm not sure you get a vote when you're getting voted off the
I
island.
think if you're off, you're
Did
off.
he bring us his torch at the end of that meeting?
I just want to make sure. I didn't get $1 million and I'm gone.
Well, you weren't the last one off the island. Okay.
Yes.
Can I, are you ready to vote on the minutes as amended?
amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is the presentation on the best practices. I think we had had a presentation at the last meeting, and then they were to come back, the committee came back for your, as I recall, for your questions or comments, or is that fair to say, Mr. Palermo? Yeah. So do you want to introduce who you have here from your committee, and we'll see if counselors want to,
Recognize Mr. Palermo, Ms. Foxman, and Mr. Giesman.
is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So I think you almost have a quorum of the committee.
We have 6.
Yeah,
Actually, we do.
Right.
yeah, you do have a quorum of the committee. It's not posted. I think that's all right.
It was my understanding, Mayor and councilors, that we would come back today to answer any questions that the council might have with regard to the report we submitted at our last meeting, or your last meeting. So I think we're prepared to do that.
Great, thank you. Councilor Dostal, then Councilor Spector.
I believe that the report was extremely well done. I sat and, believe it or not, I read it in one reading. It was very interesting to me. And interesting to the point where I said that each and every committee that's functioning right now should have a copy of that. And I don't know how many copies were made or were available, but
We can probably make more.
yeah. But if they were, certainly we should make them available to all of the committees.
I believe it's posted, isn't it?
It's online.
It's online, so it's accessible to anybody who would like a copy. But of course, if somebody would like us to make one up, we'd be happy to do it.
Councilor Spector.
Yeah, thank you for all the work that went into this. One of the things that struck me, it was just one small note, or Councilor Giesman might have mentioned this, was at some of your meetings, you had trouble, you wanted more attendance at the meetings. I think we've certainly, both subcommittees, council, other committee meetings, have heard a lot about not getting public input. And meetings were posted, and I'm sure a lot more could have been done to doing outreach. And I'm wondering what kind of discussions that you might have had about how can we draw more people to meetings? Because before that, people were talking about, well, provide food at me. I mean, all kinds of ideas came up. And yet, ironically, you ran into the exact same problem. I actually thought your meetings were going to be very well attended. I was surprised that they weren't. Because certainly there was a lot of notification about them. There were emails about them, and there were other places they were put in. It's kind of a catch-22.
At the risk of being corrected by my colleagues here, and I'm certainly willing to be corrected, I would urge that a committee such as this be continued. We had a very short period of time, very limited resources, understandably so. So that much of our time was really devoted to technical, really not specific issues. When I think about it in my own mind, I think of a restaurant trying to determine if their customers are pleased. In order to do that, you survey the customers, which I think we did in the public forums. We need to expand that, I think, and I think we were all talking in terms of possibly doing case studies if we had the resources and more time to do it. at which time we'd be talking about issues that were of really more critical interest to a broader audience. And I think that would bring people in. We were speaking, I think, primarily in generalities. We were very pleased with the attendance we received at the public forums because that's where people came to discuss issues in which they were really interested. As I said before, most of our other meetings were just working meetings, and I think the opportunity for meaningful input at some of those meetings for members of the public was somewhat attenuated. They're more than welcome.
So just clarification, so at the public forum meetings, you did get good attendance? They
Yes.
were well attended?
Yes.
Those were the meetings you had early on?
Well, we had
They were scattered.
one about early on and one about halfway through.
So there were 2 of those meetings?
Right, one was in May, and that was the general forum, and then the one on the Meadows was
August 25th.
August 25th, right.
Sure.
Just to add to this, I think the expectation that the public turns out at meetings, and I'm an old timer in this as well, is an old paradigm. We've got media, so many different versions now, and I think people are interacting or informed in ways that we may not know about. So I don't, and also we spent an awful lot of time, and I think Jim alluded to this, just getting our house in order wasn't very interesting, even to us, I think. So there was a lot of early drudge work, like finding our way, where are we going with this? So, but I will say this, and I'll say this on camera, and I don't know if they're here, but it's very disappointing. We never had a reporter from the Gazette at any of our meetings. Perhaps at the forum, one or both of the forums, but not.
And you've certainly probably reached out a number.
Oh yes, we were very good. Our webmaster here, everything was posted. We went beyond, as we said in the report, we went beyond the open meeting law to inform. And we had meetings. We met with the editor of the paper as well. So we were disappointed in that regard because we see that as an opportunity to reach out to people in all kinds of ways without them having to come to us. So.
I might add too, I've had many people comment that they'd seen our meetings on NCTV, so we'd like to thank NCTV and
the same audience we draw.
Yeah.
Have to do a Nielsen rating.
I would add that it's really that's the point of almost all the recommendations. It's not a quick fix to get people. The point is to get a larger group of people interested in the city and informed. We need that participation. But I don't, again, that we didn't solve the problem in a hurry doesn't mean that we're giving up or that you should give up. That really is the end result of what we're looking at. And the assumption is that the better information with information easily accessible, with that built into the process, so that in fact, if you don't get the input that you're looking for, you start again. That input is a really crucial part of the process. If you have to delay it, you have to delay it.
I want to thank the whole committee for the many hours that you spent and opened it up to the public, which there is a definite need of total communication with the citizens here in the city of Northampton. I've gotten some good responses from some of my residents who actually did attend some of those meetings, especially about the landfill and so forth. I feel it's like a tool, and I'd like to see this to continue on. I think it's in dire need that we keep this group together, no matter who it's going to be, so that we can work with all the citizens in here in the city of Northampton to listen to what their problems are and try to help to work out a compromise before it escalates into something that could have been settled earlier. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Here. I also want to thank the committee for all the work you've done. You made some very specific recommendations about the now now in limbo, Citizens Advisory Committee. I'm just wondering, because you didn't really go into detail about that, I'm just wondering how you specifically see a revised Citizen Advisory Committee, which I assume you see as the kind of successor to your Best Practices Committee. If there are some specific goals or mission.
Well, I'll take a stab. I think we said also a continuation either of that or of this committee, that somewhere there needs to be a forum process, that ideally it should include, as ours did, a significant number of counselors, I mean, 3 of the counselors, but that you need a place where people can come with ideas and be heard, and where the city process, the way it does things, can be continually examined and evaluated. I think that's what a Citizens Advisory Committee. The council has so much business that it does pro forma, that these events often, to somebody who's not paying a great deal of attention, doesn't have much meaning. You're simply going through a kind of a ceremony. Most of the work, most of the discussion has happened somewhere else. What a Citizens Advisory Committee might do, and again, this is something that I hope that we're going to fill out in the next 90 days, or the next approximately 90 days, to hear from people, to hear how, what sort of the need for an ongoing conversation is.
And if I may, Maureen, I think that our recommendation was that either the Citizen Advisory Committee, which is on the books, be revived to serve this function, or that a new committee be established, which would serve this function as well. And I think that, hopefully, I want to remind everybody that in this room on January 5th, Monday, January 5th at 7 p.m. is the first public feedback session when the whole committee will be here. So encourage your constituents to come. Please come yourselves and let us know, because we really need to get feedback from you on these recommendations. And if you think they're a bad idea, come and tell us that. If you think they're a good idea, tell us that. And then 2 months after that, it's going to be in our laps. And these fine people are going to be out of a job, at least temporarily. And we as a council will have to decide what actions we want to take to improve the city's practice. And that responsibility will be ours alone.
I just want to point out one big difference that I've seen from looking from with the ordinance that created the Citizens Advisory Committee, and that's that it is entirely made of citizens, whereas, of course, our Best Practices Committee was almost half city councilors. So I'm just, I'm assuming that they have a very different goal. I mean, I'm not sure whether there's a recommendation to embody that committee with city councilors, or if we're just talking about. And maybe you folks talked a little bit about that in your.
No. Okay. My recollection is we did not go into detail. We did not have the ordinance in front of us. Some of us read it on our own. And I know that was a discussion precipitating the formation of this committee as to whether or not you would want it to go back and actually revive the Citizens Advisory Committee.
What was the date? January 5th, this room, 7 p.m. It's a Monday.
So we didn't have that discussion about that. I think we probably all have different ideas about that. But I think it would be a good exercise to take a look at that ordinance, to take a look at our charge resolution that charged the committee, look at the report and say, okay, where do we go? How do we go forward in the best way to look at these recommendations?
Thank you.
Council Barsley.
I look at this draft report as almost like a halfway point. We did a lot of research. We did a lot of kind of process. I agree with that. Some of those meetings were not the most interesting meetings to watch or attend. If I had to watch myself talking about some of those issues, I probably wouldn't do it. So I can understand why the attendance was down. But hopefully with these recommendations, it's going to provoke some more interest. And, comparable to Jack Horner's response about the CPC not wanting to put out a list of priorities and sort of shaping people's thoughts, I think we were the same way. So we gave some very concrete general suggestions, but right now we want that dialogue to see how people respond. And so I think this is a really critical part of the process now in terms of shaping some of those, because on those recommendations, a lot of work has to be done for implementing whatever they are. So there's going to be resolutions that'll have to be written in, ordinances, proposals that have to be drafted and all that type of stuff. But this is really a critical phase. So this is only halfway of some sort.
Other comments? Well, I want to thank you for all your work. It's a very informative report, including counselors. Thanks for pointing that out. And it's sitting on my table, isn't it, Councilor Narkowitz? The meeting I have, it's right in the middle of the table. I think there's an interesting question for all of you and for me and for many others as elected officials about what's your role as an elected official versus what's the role of citizens in this process, because the vote is ultimately the way people express their opinion about how you and I or anybody else is doing, and what's that line between, because elections do have consequences, and you can't sort of create a process that doesn't pay attention to that. So there's a fine line there that I think you were trying to find in here, and I appreciate that, and I think we're going to have to all think about that.
If I may, I felt like having a mix of elected officials and citizens on this committee was an ideal solution that worked for us as a committee.
Right. I just, I think I think there's really important and good suggestions in there in terms of civic engagement, how to get people engaged and active and understanding the data that's out there. I think I think we have to look at the Citizen Advisory Committee issue, and I think we have to think about, what are the different levels of civic engagement that people can do? What can people, different people's level, everybody has a different level, let me put it that way. So how do you meet people where they are, right? But I really appreciated all the suggestions that you have. Some of them I think we're already doing, some of them we're thinking about implementing, and I think you all gave us a great menu of options to think about.
And just to note, that's our draft report.
Right.
We've got the 3 months less than that, and we'll be back.
Right, and I appreciate that.
Right.
So we hope to hear from the public.
The hardest
Scheduling several hearings. We just have the one scheduled at this point, but we don't have a full scheduled date yet.
Right, good, thanks, yeah. And thanks for all your work. You're the hardest working ad hoc committee in the city. In existence.
Oh, wow.
Wait, I didn't mean to single out the Gazette.
Nobody else.
The Republican didn't show up at our meetings either. No.
You're equal opportunity on that, are you?
Beacon covered us.
All right. Well, thank you again, and thanks for coming tonight. There's no need to have a vote to accept this, is there, Counselor?
I don't know, so.
Okay, all right. All right, the next is the South Street resolution. This is for first reading. Do you want me to read the whole text again that I just read about 5 minutes ago? No.
I'd like to move approval.
Is there a second on that? Is there any further discussion on the South Street issue, South Street school issue?
I just wanted to add that I was going to I was going to request that we consider 2 readings. I'll make the motion and we can have a discussion about it because of some timing issues around the music center being a school operates on a school calendar year, and so they really want to try to schedule the construction that they hope to do in the parking lot for during the summer, because that's when the school's closed, that's when the students aren't there, and they're a little concerned about getting a contractor hired and getting all that so I guess I want to have a conversation about whether if we wait until January 15th on a second reading, that's going to, and I did ask the board of directors whether that timing would be an issue, and they did say it would be an issue to try to line up a contractor. So
if this passes on first reading, I'm going to make the motion to have the discussion about suspending Rule 14.
I'll second it.
The motion's been made and seconded on we're in first reading.
Yes,
So
exactly.
let's take the first reading,
Yes.
okay? The motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now the motion is on suspension of Rule 2.
And I'll second it.
But somebody has to move it first.
I move it. She seconds it.
Because I can't move it. Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. And if I could presume to ask Wendy a question, because I know you know this stuff. When something's put out to RFP for a lease, do you think, is it 30 or 60 days? Do you remember? For a lease, do you remember if it's 30 or 60 days? No. It's a 30B question.
Yeah.
We're all stumped here, and I thought, there's somebody who might know, because you're good on that stuff. So
That was the issue, because we still, even when we pass this on second reading, there still has to be a 30-day.
I think it is 30, but.
For a lease. So if we wait till January 15th, that moves it to February 15th, and then they're into March and April. So that was the concern about.
It's 30 days. I'm getting confused between the amount of time that rules on the federal level have to be promulgated, be out there before they can sneak them in. Right, so you think it's 30 days?
I think if it's 30, even at 30, it's going to be a time crunch. So if it's 60, it's more of a time crunch. So so that's the concern that they raised about trying to first go through the bidding process, hopefully successfully, but then to line up a contractor that could specify that it be done during July, August when the school is closed. So it's not disruptive, because the parking lot couldn't be used at that point. So.
Okay, we're in suspension of rules, so the motion's been made and seconded to suspend Rule 2. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now a motion.
Second reading?
Motion's been made and seconded, second reading. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Now we're getting to a very important item. This is the weighers of hay, other articles. We're going to appoint the weighers of hay, other articles. This is Chris Moran, Joanne Moran, Beth Willard, Don Willard Jr., excuse me, Elizabeth Willard, Crystal Willard, and William T. Willard Jr.
Second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is the appointment of, to the Community Preservation Committee. This is Downey Meyer to serve the remainder of the term to 2011, replacing Mason Marin. This is the Conservation Commission's appointment to the CPC. So can we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
For a second?
Second.
This had been referred to appointments and
We
evaluations.
discussed this appointment in our last meeting, and we're moving it forward with our recommendation to approve.
The motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is the appointment.
Is Downey here by any chance?
I don't.
No.
Okay.
I don't see Downey. Next is the appointment to Central Business Architecture Committee, Alon B. Tierney, term to expire April 2011, replacing Peter Frothingham. We need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second, and Councilor Spector.
We had a really good discussion in our last meeting with the candidate, and we're moving this forward with our recommendation.
Alon was actually here earlier, but I don't think she was
That's why I
able to
wanted-
stay. So,
She's watching. Thanks for.
are you ready to vote on this appointment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And this is the seat on the CBAC that is to be filled by an architect. And we got recommendations from the local AIA chapter to fill this seat, yeah.
And since it's a replacement of someone who's left, what's the term of this appointment?
To expire April 2011.
Okay, so it's a 3-year appointment.
Yeah, I think so.
2.5 rather,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Okay. So it's the remainder of Peter's term.
Complicated, yeah.
It must be the remainder of his term, okay.
Actually, no, I think his term expired.
I don't know.
I'd have to check, but I
Okay,
believe it
that's fine.
expired. Okay, we have a set of applications to the Youth Commission. These will be referred to the Committee on Appointments and Evaluations. Sammy Sarvet, Aelita Tamayo, Camille Fantasia, Ian Lutz, and Graham Spencer Oral.
Move referral. Second.
Second it.
Any discussion? Were you gonna just, no?
No, we're not going to suspend. We talked about it last night.
Okay.
Some of them may come to the next
Okay,
meeting.
great. Okay.
We'll see what happens.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And next is applications to the Committee on Disabilities. This would be Daniel L. Langer and Pamela Grant.
I would like to ask that we suspend Rule 31 on Danny Langler, and also his caretaker also, Pamela Grant. Daniel applied and put out his application in June, has attended our meetings very, very faithfully. He has been coming to our meetings since July, and he cannot be here tonight anyways because the woman that's taking care of him and that has lived with him for 4 years is not well right now. But Danny has great interest of being on the Committee on Disabilities. He's been highly involved in many, many issues throughout the city. So I know I've been at Danny's house. He lives on my ward. He's a big advocate for people with disabilities. He's wheelchair bound, but very active. So and I'm asking that we suspend Rule 31 so that we could.
I want to make sure that we had a motion made and seconded on the nomination. Was there a motion, did we have a second on the, so can somebody, Councilor Dostal moved his appointment, and can we have a second on the motion? And now we have a motion to suspend the rule.
And
It was actually a motion to refer, and we're asking now the motion to suspend the rule. And we have who made and seconded that? Did you have that? Okay, good. All right, so the discussion is on suspension of the rule to refer, yes.
I remember Dan very well. Yeah, he ran for city council.
I remember, I worked on his campaign.
I remember when he got hurt.
Yeah.
And, he was a nice guy.
He is a nice guy.
And, I would just say,
Yep.
God
Well,
bless him.
he's been coming to city school, and he'll be active in the Committee on Disabilities. I think it'll be great. Yeah.
And I know Dan Langer, some not as well as some of you, and I certainly support his membership on this committee. I'm just not sure if he has been coming to your meetings and participating fully, why not just refer to the Appointments Committee? We made this mistake last time with the DPW. So why not go through our regular process, especially because he has been participating satisfactorily, I believe, in the process, Disability Committee's processes to date. I'd be happy to change my mind, but that's my concern. Nothing against Dan whatsoever.
I just feel that he has been waiting for his application to come forth. He's attended every meeting faithfully from July on. And I went into the mayor's office just a couple of weeks ago to see what was going on with that application. So he has attended the meetings faithfully. He has great concerns to be involved in it. So I do not feel, and I really do feel that there's no reasons why we cannot suspend the Rule 31 on this. I think he well deserves that.
I don't deny that for a
And
moment.
he's attended them very faithfully, and I just think he deserves it.
Councilor Narkowitz and then Councilor Spector.
I wanted to just comment that there's a lot of buzz around this whole issue of suspending rules or not suspending rules. I think if we want to address that, it's a matter more to look at our rules. When we look at our rules, and we see, do we want to allow suspension of rules? But as far as I'm concerned, it allows us to suspend the rules, and so but I understand your point is well taken, and obviously we've heard a lot about people raising concerns about it, but frankly, when someone says we broke the law or we broke the rules or we did whatever, these are the rules that we as a council at the beginning of this session passed, and so these are the rules that govern the way we do our business. So and again, we're having a discussion about why we're doing it in this case, and I think in the other cases there were good reasons why the rules were suspended, and people talked about the qualifications of the candidates. So I just wanted to throw that out there, just the larger discussion about this, so that doesn't get lost.
Councilor Spector and then Councilor Barnes.
Just a reality check here is that, in our committee, we've often suspended the rule when someone has served on the committee another term. We've checked with chairs of the committee at times to make sure that person, when they're going to come on, has been a good member of that committee. There were 1 or 2 cases where we actually found out the person hadn't been attending, so we didn't suspend the rule, or we made sure we talked to that person, found out why. The reality check is that our committee is a way of, if there's someone who, for example, has not been attending the meeting, doesn't know, is moved through somehow to be appointed, nobody here knows them. But some of the folks who come through, look, we're a fairly small community. Everybody here, a majority, have even known this person. They've served in a variety of capacities. I would encourage the public, they can come to our appointments committee. We don't grill people there. We're not, you know, we meet the person, we ask them why they're on it. We mostly thank them, don't we? We say, thanks so much for serving. There have been a couple of occasions, the appointments committee has had to look at when we've had, I think this has only happened a couple of times in the last few years, where we've had to decide on an appointment because we've had more than one applicant. That was with the Board of Health. But primarily what we're screening, we're kind of a last screening, and many times because we don't know the candidate at all, we do want to meet with them, we want to see their interest. But when we have a case like this, I agree with Councilor Narkowitz, are we going to really just become so bureaucratic here that, you know, more than half the council knows the person, they've served on the committee, they've met with the person. Yes, we could have this person and their assistant come down for about 10 minutes, which is how long, maybe 5, have them come down, meet with us. We certainly could do that, but I'm going to vote to support it.
Thank you.
To suspend. To suspend.
Councilor Bardsley, and then Councilor Narkowitz.
I would also make a distinction between the type of committees or boards that we were talking about in the comparison. You know, the Board of Public Works has considerable authority and makes some very important decisions. And I think the process of an appointment there, it calls for a lot of public involvement. People really want to know. And then in doing it all in one night does not make people feel very trusting and confident that there was above board process. This is basically an advisory committee, and it does have some powers, but I believe it's fairly limited. And the main power that it has is the power of advocacy. And Daniel is a fantastic advocate, and I think this just allows him to do the work that he can do for the city and for those he'll be representing as soon as possible. So I am in full support of it. I also want to make reference to Rule 31, I think it is, that we suspended. And it really doesn't mandate that everything gets referred. It's more of a suggestion, and it gives us considerable breadth in terms of how we do. And quite frankly, I don't even think we need to. I think it's a good practice to suspend it because it has this discussion. But it doesn't say mandate that we have to refer everything to a committee. It's a pretty fluid process. So,
Councilor Narkowitz.
With danger that a best practices committee meeting might break out here.
Too many people.
Exactly. I just wanted to clarify. I wasn't in any way suggesting that our process is too bureaucratic or it's not bureaucratic enough. I was just basically saying the rules allow us to do this, and so if people don't like that, then we should look at that rule and change it. That was my only point. But don't tell us we're breaking the rules if we're following the rules. I guess it's as simple as I can boil it down.
I'm gonna rule that it's time to vote on the suspension.
So
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now the motion should be to the appointment of both Mr. Langer and Ms. Grant to the Committee on Disabilities. Is there a motion to appoint?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And congratulations to Pam and Dan for being appointed.
Thank you.
Okay, next you have 2 committee reports. I'm going to ask you to take them together. The Social Services Veterans Affairs minutes of November 17th and appointments and evaluation minutes of December 9th, 2008. Motion to accept?
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You get that? Who? Yeah. Okay. Now we're moving to the warrant to restrain dogs from running at large, 1109 through 123109, and the warrant to catch and confine dogs from running at large, 1109 through 123109. Is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yeah. The moral of that story is don't run at large. Next item is the Second reading of the FY 2009 capital plan appropriation of $100,000 to fund Smith Vocational Agricultural School, 5th year of the 5-year technology plan. Can we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? I'm going to recognize Mr. Pyle who would like to speak to that issue, and Dr. Lamas is also here.
Yes, I want to apologize to both Dr. Lamas and to the City Council. We have an ordinance that requires whenever we go out to borrow for something that the department head must appear for the City Council to ask for the borrowing. This was the only item in our entire capital plan that was going to be borrowed for, and it's because we had been in a 5-year plan, and it's my fault. I totally slipped my mind that I needed to have Dr. Lamas here at our last meeting to explain what he's going to do with this borrowing for his computers. Dr. Lamas.
Well, you don't have to apologize to me. It's a privilege to be here.
We have a motion to recognize Mr. Dr.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Because I want to tell you what it does. We've transformed Smith School. We've had $100,000 a year for 5 years. We have more technology than we've ever seen. It's being used in every aspect of the schools. Everybody's online. The school is wireless. We have computer labs and carts, and we're on the internet throughout the campus, and it's paying off. I need to tell you that last week 2 of our kids beat all the other kids in the state in auto technology, and will be representing Massachusetts in New York City. And also, I need to know that you may have known for the last couple of years we've had a couple of kids go off to national competitions. And we're one of the smallest vocational schools in the state, and we've been winning national medals. Well, one of our graduates from last year has now been chosen to represent the United States on an international competition in Canada. So there's an international team, it's like the Olympics, in Calgary, Canada next September. One of our graduates was the first one picked for that team. So we may have an international winner against 50 countries. And you can see that online if you go to Skills USA World Team. I want to go to Calgary, Canada. It costs about 2,700 euros to be there for the 7 days of the competition, but he goes with his teacher out of the national pool of money. So we're putting out our kids are state qualified as the best, and maybe international because we won the national competition. So it pays off. Thanks for your support. It's 5 years of technology. Our teachers are really learning to use it. Our kids probably know more than the adults. So we now have a state-of-the-art vocational technical agricultural high school, and thank you very much. I'm going to be retiring in 2 weeks, so continue to support Art Apostolou, a Northampton resident, our new superintendent, and the school. So the kids and their families and teachers and everyone, thanks for all your support.
Thank you.
Frank has really made a difference in Smith School, and I think if he hadn't been the superintendent for the last 7 or 8 years, we wouldn't be where we are today. So I want to thank Frank for the work he's done in transforming Smith School into a school that works.
It's with your council support, though. You've given us a lot of support. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, and good luck on your return.
And
Thanks. I'll be around.
we're hoping Frank's moving to Northampton.
I don't know if I can afford it.
We're going to be voting on some affordable housing. I know you're.
I see that for
I know that
retirees.
you're going to be a pensioner, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Are we ready to vote on this? This is the 100,000 borrowing? Yeah?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. We have a group now of others that are not borrowings that are in the capital plan. Do you want to take them as a group?
Yes, please.
So this is the appropriation of $42,000 to fund repairs at the Bridge Street School, $60,000 for a roof replacement at Leeds School, $185,000 for equipment and vehicle replacements, and that was a set of different trucks in the city, and we had listed a few. Bad, and at your next meeting, we may need to do a presentation on exactly how that all works so that you understand it as we're moving into the upcoming year. You know, we've had the discussion around the police station. There are other capital needs in the city. I want people to understand the approach that we've been taking in terms of preserving a small percentage of the general fund to fund our capital needs. So would that be useful to bring back to you in January as a part of our ongoing budget discussions? Okay, next is the transfer of $80,000 from the stabilization fund to Veterans Services Benefits.
Move approval.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Right.
Oh, okay, a motion to,
I'd like to make
Councilor
that
Marion
motion for a second reading, because he did mention it at our meeting.
Okay, so I'm hearing Councilor Marion Labarge moving that, and Councilor Dostal seconding it, and thank you for the reminder, Councilor Raymond Labarge. And that's a motion to suspend Rule 14. Is there a second? Any discussion on the suspension of that rule? This is because we need to get, because you won't be meeting again until the middle of January.
Right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is, oh, no, move second reading. Yeah, is there a second on that? Second by Councilor Rickman, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the next one I think is the same issue because you won't be meeting again. This is the litter vac. Transfer of $7,452 from the parking meter reserve fund to the parking division of capital lease litter vacuum account. Is there a motion?
Over approval?
Second.
Any discussion in first reading? Besides Mr. Pyle getting a turn to drive it? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'm gonna be out there watching. Is there a motion to suspend Rule 14?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Good reading? Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next is the set of CPC recommendations. So I'm going to do them one at a time because each one has its own intricacies. So the first is appropriation of $10,000 from the Community Preservation Act budget reserve to fund a conservation fund for high priority time-sensitive open space acquisition and preservation projects. And that needs a motion in first reading.
So move.
There's a second. Discussion on this, and we're recognizing Mr. Horner again. Just we know who he is. Yeah, Councilor Marion Labarge.
Yes, Jack, maybe you could answer some questions for me on the $10,000 on open space. What does the $10,000 do that the board itself, that somehow, how would that affect the board for making it to act quickly, and how does it come into play? Why does this $10,000 have to go through the CPA and be approved so quickly like this?
Well, I'm not sure that it needs to be approved quickly. I mean, we're not asking anybody to do this outside of the normal CPA process. But
why can't they do it on their own? Why did they have to go through this?
why do they need CPA money? The idea of the conservation, and I brought all my files with me. The idea of the conservation fund is that it's available for the Conservation Commission to use to act quickly on projects.
That's what I'm asking.
And so I would just say, in terms of the CPA, we are going in 2009 to 2 funding rounds. The first one will start in January, and we expect to make recommendations in May. The second will start in August, or maybe even the eligibility forms due in July, because we know council ends at the end of 2009. We don't want to have a situation where something can't carry over to 2010. Second set of recommendations in the very late fall. So that means that in terms of getting CPA money, there's only 2 times a year that people can apply. So if a project were to come up at a different time, having a conservation fund allows action to be taken, without having to wait, really necessarily for several months. That's the logic behind it.
Okay, I'm curious as to why 2 votes were against it. Can you mention why? 2 people voted against it. What was their reasons for that?
Well, I didn't bring the minutes with me, but I will say that there were some members of the committee who, like Darrell LaFleur earlier, were not comfortable with the idea of giving money to a fund, and felt that it would be better for the committee and the council to vote on specific projects. I mean, that's clearly a point of view that's out there. But the majority of the committee felt that it was a good project.
Councilor Reckman, then Councilor Narcoitz, was that I'm trying to decipher bidding behavior.
It seems to me that the Conservation Commission and the Planning Department have an admirable record of using monies that they have acquired over the years to grab a hold of these kind of properties relatively quickly. So I have no hesitation giving them money for this purpose from the CPA. I may have some other questions about the Valley CDC, but when it's City of Northampton, which is land to be used, purchased to benefit the public good for conservation purposes, I have no problem with that at all. And I do understand why it'd be handy for them to have an account with $10,000 and that they could write a check to make a deposit or get a binder on some property quickly. They will then obviously have to find other sources of money, and hopefully that other source would serve to replenish this sum of money, so they would eternally have $10,000 of CPA money available to them for quick action.
Councilor Narcoitz and then Councilor Spector.
I guess in looking at the letter that Darrell LaFleur, who's my constituent, submitted, we're sort of getting into this territory now where the CPA has been around for a while, and we're now starting to actually have case law around it, as Amherst recently found out, defining what can actually be spent and what can't be spent. Was there any investigation or research on the issue of so enlighten me, I guess, about this issue of setting up a fund and essentially
the conservation
discretionary fund?
One of the things that we do is one of our resources, I should say, is the Community Preservation Coalition. It's a membership organization, so we're a member. Because we're a member, anytime we have a question, we can call and ask them. That's really the group that put the whole CPA thing together. And so we inquired with them, and we found out that, in fact, a number of communities have conservation funds and that it's legal to put CPA money into them. Now, CPA money can only be used for projects which would meet the CPA law. Right? So, but on the open space, I think it's fairly clear on that. So it definitely is a legal use of the funds.
I had somewhat the same question. You answered it.
Other questions on this one? Councilor?
This particular proposal and a couple of others in the last, several days, this week, I've had a flurry of emails and phone calls on them, and along with some other issues. And being the time of year that it is, things being very busy, I haven't been able to get back to everybody who has concerns or has something to say or something to ask. So since these are not time sensitive, my preference would be not to, for myself, not to vote on them tonight and to continue the discussion that I can have with my constituents. Because I don't know all the concerns so that's where I am on this on a couple of these. It would be my preference, and I realize it's only a first reading, but still, when you're voting for a first reading, it often looks like that is supporting it. And as I said, I have not heard all the concerns that people have contacted me about. And it's only been in the last handful of days. It's been a flurry until. Up until then, I had not heard a lot of concerns about these. Have you been hearing, you look puzzled, Jack, have you been hearing concerns at the committee level?
I was only puzzled because I was trying to figure out if I was allowed to respond to what you were saying. Sure, we've heard a number of things. I've heard a number of things. But my take on it, Councilor Bardsley, is that there's a month between this council meeting and the meeting on January 15th where you do the second reading. And from my point of view, a month seems like plenty of time for a lot of discussion to occur. The council obviously can do whatever it wants. It'd be a big surprise to us not to have the first reading tonight, and a disappointment.
It is allowable for, just as a clarification, is allowable for one or more of you to abstain. And that doesn't, I believe, as long as the majority of those voting vote to move something forward, it stays alive. I believe that's right. Councilor?
There are still questions I have about this, but I will support it on first reading because, I mean, the reason we have two readings is because if we find information between the first and second reading, we have the right to vote no. And so I will cast my vote yes tonight, but anyone out there watching, that doesn't guarantee what my vote will be on second reading. That's the purpose of it.
Darrell didn't give me a copy of that. Sorry, I didn't.
Councilor Marion LaBarge.
Councilor Ray Labarge asked me what Jack Horner had stated just a minute ago, so maybe Jack, you can explain to him. You had stated that you were surprised in regards to what Councilor Michael Bardsley was talking about.
Well, what I was saying, Councilor Labarge, was that, of course, the council can do whatever it wants, but certainly on the committee, we're hoping for a first reading tonight, and we think that having a month between the first reading and the second reading is enough time for discussion to continue outside of council.
I agree with that.
To move the question.
You want to vote on this one?
Yeah.
You want a roll call?
Yes.
Okay. You weren't going to get away with no roll calls today. To keep exercising that party.
Councilor Carney?
Yes.
Councilor Dostal?
Yes.
Councilor Marianne Labarge?
Yes.
Councilor Raymond Labarge?
Yes.
Councilor Murphy?
Yes.
Councilor Narcoitz?
Yes.
Councilor Reckman?
Yes.
Councilor Spector?
Yes.
Councilor Bardsley?
Okay. The next item is appropriation of $2,761 from the CPA, budget reserve funding to the DAR Betty Allen chapter for the installation of custom interior storm windows and the restoration of a flag.
Move approval.
Second it.
Is there any discussion? Are these historically correct storm windows?
They're interior storm windows as opposed to exterior, so yes, is the short answer.
And just so we're clear here, the reason the Betty Allen chapter is eligible for this is, I suppose, like the same reason the First Church is eligible, and they're non-profits.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but so a regular homeowner couldn't access this money for this purpose.
No, that's actually not true.
Okay.
No, a homeowner could apply.
Yes.
And if the committee and the council felt, I mean, for instance, supposing someone lived in, let's say, a historic district and had a very historic home. I will say that in order to get an application to us in the historic preservation area, a property either has to be on the, I think it's the state or the national register or eligible, and if that's not the case, a project has to be deemed historically valuable by the historical commission. So if a homeowner's property wasn't on or eligible, the homeowner would have to go make the case to the historical commission before even submitting an eligibility form.
Councilor Raymond Labarge, your historic house.
I just have one reading this evening,
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
okay?
Sure.
Okay, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I just, I want to applaud this. I think this is a great project. It's a very significant house. I've been in the interior on a couple of occasions, so. And without, this is a real example of the value of the CPC. And because without this, we have a historic building that may be, have some needs that they could not address, so I think this is great.
And this applicant, by the way, I mean, their board is very small. It's really one or two people. The process was complex for them. Originally, they wanted more money, and then they did some work because they thought they'd get the money, but we can't reimburse, so then we said, you know, we can't give you money for that. So the applicant has worked very hard with us in the process, and you know, they deserve thanks for sticking with it, because it's a complex thing.
Councilor Marianne Labarge, Councilor Narcoitz, and Councilor Reck.
I have to say also too that I will support this 100%. We were invited to an open house there, I think it was like about last year, and it was brought up about the storm windows and so forth, and we told them that they really should look at the CPA possibly helping them out. I mean, the house itself, there's a lot of history there, and they just do so much for the community in that, so how could we ever say no to something like this?
Ready to vote on this one? Oh, no, you had your hand up, I'm sorry.
I was going to add to the chorus of people saying, you know, what a treasure this is in the neighborhood, and just add that last year, the neighborhood where I live, there was sort of a private fundraising effort to help them paint the house. They reached out to the neighborhood and asked for funding, and they got a really great response. So I think that's a testament to how people feel about having this historic home in their neighborhood.
Councilor Reckman, did you have your hand up? No. Ready to vote on this? Do you need a roll call?
Well,
Yeah.
question? Yeah. The application itself specifies the figure of 1,700. It looks like there's a little discrepancy. Am I, what's the total figure then for this?
For this,
Yeah. 27 is what we got on.
2,761.
Okay, and then the quote, yeah, I see that. Okay, and then the cost, material and labor on the proposal itself is 1,761. So I was just,
Well,
I guess I don't have all of the.
Hold on a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, I just like to look through the thing. And then there's the 2 supporting letters. Somebody else has something.
If you're looking at the quote of 1761,
Yeah.
that's for the storm windows, and then the other 1,000 is for the flagpole.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I didn't see the other 1,000 on the.
And as long as Councilor Carney is speaking, though, may I answer her previous question? I'm not a math person, but I did bring my calculator, so I sat there and I back and forth. So now we've got a very fine staffer, John Fry, the city's something of weights and measures. Well, anyway, who does our fiscal stuff. But if I've done it correctly, if you passed all these recommendations, that would bring the historic preservation to 48.8%, affordable housing to 28.6%, the open space to 20.1%, and the recreation to 2.2%. Now, don't hold me to those exact figures, but that's what I did in the back of the room.
That's what it looks like, the guy with the calculator.
Yeah.
Okay, are we ready to vote on the
Yes.
Allen chapter? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is the $12,000 from the Community Preservation Act budget reserve funding for the Broadbrook Coalition for the removal of invasive species located in the Fitzgerald Lake Conservation Area.
Move approval.
Second it.
Pretty straight up. This is a maintenance project for the Fitzgerald Lake Conservation Area. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Does all of this work, does this just pay for materials or does it pay for some labor too?
I don't know.
It pays, I believe, for the materials and labor.
Okay.
It's not the kind of thing, as I understand it, that can be done primarily by volunteers.
I actually think you need some experts out there to help you to identify them.
So you actually have to pay someone to come in.
It's not easy to pick out necessarily, right? Councilor Bardsley?
Yeah, in the spirit of public disclosure, I am a member, at least I think I am a member of the Broadbrook Coalition. I think I paid my dues for the year. So just for the record, I don't think that constitutes a
I think the Ethics Commission would be fine.
I just sent my check in last week
I
too,
think
so.
you're all fine.
Yeah.
And if you're not, I'll visit you in prison. Ready to vote on this one? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is the appropriation of $118,600 from the Community Preservation Act budget reserve funding to the Nonotuck Land Fund for the purchase of a conservation restriction on 168 acres of open space. This is
Approval.
Second it.
This is the Marble Brook, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael and I were at the discussion on this, and I know, and I think Michael, we wanted to support this.
Okay.
We went through the whole hearing.
And I concur with the counselor, and I would add, I'm an enthusiastic supporter. It's a great project. We've had some detailed presentations, and I think this is another fantastic example of being able to do something we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So, and I also want to thank the people who have been behind this, and they've worked diligently in promoting this. And I think our future citizens are going to be better off with this, though. Thank you.
Yeah. Councilor Spector and then Councilor Beckman.
I just want to address a general issue here, which I think this is a good time to do. And Councilor Bardsley just made a good point. Earlier in public session, I don't think you were here, Mayor, someone spoke about how maybe it's time to look at Community Preservation Act and actually implying that it's, we shouldn't do it because budgets are hard and we're cutting other things. the Community Preservation Act, it was written, it's exactly a project like this, allows planning for the future. This is what it actually said in the act. It allows planning for the future, that property taxes traditionally fund day-to-day operations, and that the Community Preservation Act actually allows the community to plan for its own future. And I was struck by, I remember when I was a kid, my parents had a little fund, and it was our play fund. That didn't mean we always played with it, but we went to a play once a year. And we didn't touch it. I remember my mother got laid off once, and my dad was like, "We're going to take that play fund. We're not going to." She said, "No, we're not touching that." It was kind of letting the kids have something like that for the future. And to me, that's when that discussion came up about doing away with the Community Preservation Act. Exactly right. The speaker said we wouldn't be doing any of these things. I thought he's absolutely right. We wouldn't have the funds to do them. And I was thinking, thank God we have the Community Preservation Act for something like this. I fully support this. I think it's a great project. And we're getting, I think it was a wonderful coalition that you built in terms of getting this, this price too. So thank you.
Okay, Councilor Reckman, did you?
I simply want to say I think that the perfect example of this is with the BPWs kicking in some money too, out of the Water Enterprise Fund. So it's an excellent collaboration between the CPA's abilities and our enterprise fund's abilities on one of our important goals.
And the nonprofit non-took land fund. Councilor Raymond Labarge and then Councilor Miriam Labarge.
Add it to the second reading on it tonight.
Well, we'll see where councilors are on
Why?
that.
Exactly.
Yeah, do you need second reading on this tonight?
No.
There's no rush on this.
No. Could I add a quick clarification? As I understand it, the Department of Public Works is not actually contributing a cash amount of $33,000. There was a question about project monitoring, and originally it seemed when the Conservation Commission was more involved with this, or maybe was going to take on the project monitoring, that a fee might be asked for, and I think that was the $33,000. And DPW came in and said, you know, basically we'll do it for free using the resources we already have. So I just want to clarify.
It's a match as opposed to actual.
It's an in-kind.
Yeah, it's an in-kind thing, yes.
Councilor Miriam.
I wanted to thank Jack for doing that because I just have concerns about that. And I also want to say I think we need to look at another big picture here of 168 acres. That's quite a bit of acreage, so I think it's a great project.
It's not a big.
Okay, are you ready to vote on this one?
Yep.
This is at first reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Is there any desire to take a suspension of rules on this? No. Okay, next is $40,000 for the from the Community Preservation Act Budgetary Reserve to fund the Recreation Commission for a playing fields feasibility study.
Move approval.
Second it.
I just want to mention that we had a meeting of all the sports leagues growing out of the concerns about the availability of soccer fields in the city. And I asked Ms. Moggio from the Recreation Commission to convene a meeting. This was at least a year ago, maybe longer, and we worked on assessing what our shortfall was in terms of fields, and this is the next phase, which is to try to identify some parcels in the city that might be able to be used as playing fields. Yeah.
Just as a clarification, although the request is for $40,000, in fact, this is the third stage, and it will go out to bid. Right. So if it comes in, you know, for less than $40,000, we'll certainly spend less.
Yep.
I mean, I support this, but could you explain why 40,000 is needed for a study?
Sure. There are four parts to this, really. First, an assessment of opportunities throughout the entire city using the GIS system, and my understanding is that the Office of Planning and Development is going to do that. That's listed here as a City of Northampton contribution of $10,000. Then once that's done, an assessment of citywide recreation field use under both current needs and in 2018 conditions, the Recreation Commission will contribute detailed survey and assessment analysis, and that's listed as a second City of Northampton budget contribution. So when the first two steps are done, my understanding is you've narrowed it down some. And then in order to see how workable it is, you've got to hire a firm, you know, to do, you know, topographical stuff, you know, site stuff, surveys, and to prepare a detailed plan for people to consider, and that's what that money would pay for.
Right up to appraisals.
Right, I understood. I just thought it was important for the public to hear that. It's not somebody kind of going around doing survey, well, do you want another soccer field? I mean,
no.
it's just the actual feasibility,
No.
the engineering and other things like that.
Quite right.
And one more piece of clarification, I think the proposal details as well that the CPA funds only fund 40,000 of a $70,000 costed project.
Well, that's right, the total cost is 70,000.
When you look at the in-kind contributions, et cetera.
Right, right, when.
In the CPA.
I think the rec commission is kicking in some of their, fund.
Yeah, the CPA request is 57% of the project.
Right.
We always ask that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further discussion on this? Ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next is $150,000 from the Community Preservation Act budgeted reserve for the funding for the David Ruggles Center for Early Florence History and Underground Railroad Studies for the purchase of the Museum and Education Center.
Move approval.
Second it.
Anybody wish to speak to this?
I will.
Yep.
When I read about this, I said, how could we not vote for something like this? You're talking about placing in a museum and also an educational center, and there is history there, so what more can we ask for?
Counselor?
Yeah, this is another one that I can enthusiastically support, and similar to what Councilor Spector was saying earlier, it's a real example of something that we can do, contribution that we can make, preserving a piece of the past for future generations that otherwise we'd not have been able to do. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is this the building that at one point in time was in danger of being demolished?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So the Historic Commission, I believe, did an intervention and created a little bubble of time where something could be negotiated. And now out of that, a building was going to be demolished, and now out of this, we have a historical center being formed. And I think it's fantastic. I really do. This is really what it's all about. So.
And I would just add that of all the projects that I've seen so far, this one had the most varied and detailed and individually original letters of support. A lot of them letters of support all have the same middle 3 paragraphs. Every single letter was completely original, very dynamic, and everyone who spoke at public comment at our meetings in favor of this also spoke from many different points of view. So there's widespread support for this.
This is something we can really be proud of. So.
Located right outside of Murphy's Package Store.
I'll drink to that.
Thank you for the contribution.
Guess you're back on the island.
That was that comment.
Okay, you ready to vote? Oh,
What are the other sources of funding for this project?
If it's all right with the, well, if it's all right with the council, I'd actually like to ask the applicant to speak to that, since.
is there a motion to recognize?
So moved.
From the applicant.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The question was, what are the other sources of
Yes.
funding?
What's the total cost of the project projected?
We're
Steve.
projecting,
Steve, why don't you just identify yourself for the people
I'm
at home?
Steve Strymer, Ward 4. But I work up in Florence on the David Ruggles Center. We're raising money in a widespread campaign, locally, regionally, and nationally to support the center. We look at it as a fairly long campaign, possibly as much as 2 years, to raise the total $300,000 we imagine to do the kind of programming we'd like, to have the displays we'd like, and the facility we'd like to have, to pull together the archives that will document the Northampton Association for Education and Industry and the Underground Railroad all the way up and down the Connecticut. There's a similar project out at the Housatonic River that documents African American history up and down the Housatonic. We kind of look as a partner with that. Blackstone's another one, and then up the coast, New Bedford and that. So we're part of the Massachusetts Underground Railroad Network, can play an important part of that. So it's sort of an unlimited kind of upper way we could expand, but we see that as the...
I'm afraid that wasn't my question.
Oh, I'm sorry, the $300,000?
What's the total cost of purchasing the
$180,000.
and doing it in the way you need it done, so it can operate as you envision it?
I would say we probably, because it needs to be wheelchair accessible, and we want to do preservation things like take off the vinyl siding and restore the house. I would say that portion of it would be about 230, say 50,000 more than the sale price.
So
And the rest
pay
would,
180.
180, yes.
You need another 50 to get it.
To get it, to make, to open it for the public.
your use.
Yeah.
And so then what are the other sources of funding you're anticipating getting in addition to this CPA money?
A widespread public campaign for raising money, individual donors. We're having house parties, done mailings, we're doing more mailings. We're going out to banks. I'm visiting Amherst College, Smith College, larger donors.
Have you raised, how much of that money have you raised so far?
Probably around $4,000 total is all. It's not a great fundraising time period right now.
And if you're not successful in raising the money you need, what will you do?
We have a group of people who will be willing to kind of front the money as we do the fundraising effort. So we realize time is of the essence for our project. So we know that we can't just depend on the fundraising part of it. So we have a group that's developing that will be kind of provide bridge money to make it make sure it happens.
Just to clarify from the application, and correct me if I'm wrong, the total budget for the project, 190 for purchase, 160 for additional renovation.
So 350.
And those percentages are broken down as 79% of the purchase would be from CPA funds and 43% of the renovation then from CPA funds. And the rest, that other 21% and what's the other? 57% are all, as you said, individual donations and private fundraising. Thanks.
So if the total project is 360, is that what you said, Maureen?
190 plus 160.
Yeah, that's 360.
350.
350, I'm sorry. And you're getting how much from the CPA? 150? 150. Okay. That's much clearer.
Okay. Any other questions?
Could I say one? Just curious. We really look at this facility as that the city, in a sense, will own. We want the educators in the town to really own this facility. It's looked at as being a place where teachers can bring and expand their studying of this subject, which is so important, and which we're really lucky to have such a local story to tell that has such wider implications. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
If somebody watching was interested in making a contribution, how would they get the money?
They can send a check to the David Ruggles Center. You don't have to do the long name. We have a long name. To Box 60405, Florence 01062.
Okay, thank you. Are you ready to vote on this in first reading? Voice votes okay? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is appropriation of $225,000 from the Community Preservation Act budgeted reserve to fund the Valley Community Development Corporation for the creation of 8 new enhanced single-room occupancy units on King Street.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second?
Yeah.
I just wanted to note I abstained from the last vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
That's okay.
So I want to mention that I am. The route for Community Preservation Act funding is that the Community Preservation Committee recommends funding and they meet with me. And then I say whether or not I'm comfortable moving it ahead or what my concerns are. I had some concerns about this one, especially the acquisition price of the property. They were able to go back and figure that out and make me a lot more comfortable about the acquisition price on that property. Secondly, we statewide, the state is moving towards a housing first policy to deal with homelessness. One of the key pieces of that housing first policy is SRO rooms. And these enhanced SRO rooms, if we have them, means that we have less people living on the street, in the culverts, down in the meadows, and all the places that we know homeless people are living. We've had a lot of folks at our meetings telling us that we're not empathetic about the needs of the poor, and I don't think that's true in our city. I think we're very empathetic about the needs of the poor. One of the things we just don't have enough of is SOR rooms, which is why I moved both of these forward. They're controversial. They don't feel as good as doing windows in a DAR chapter or doing a history museum or those other things. It doesn't engender the same kind of warm fuzzy feeling. These are not the easiest people to house, and they're not the easiest buildings to keep maintained because sometimes folks are tough on them. But they're a critical piece of our housing infrastructure. SROs are a critical piece, and so I'm hoping that the council can see the benefit of this, and especially this one on King Street, which is essentially a building that is in danger of collapsing if somebody doesn't do something with it soon. And it's in an ideal place downtown. The only other thing I want to mention is that the city of Northampton, along with the Valley, Hampden and Hampshire, Franklin County, and Berkshire County were just awarded over $1 million by DHCG's, the Interagency Council on Homelessness, to collaborate together on a housing first approach to rapid rehousing people when they become homeless. And part of that struggle is going to be to have places to rehouse people.
Mayor?
Yeah.
This particular piece and the next one, the Maple Street property, are a total of 19 SROs. We just had a fire in town. How many SROs did we lose?
I think we lost 22 at Augie's, and I'm very worried about that because...
And that's not being replaced.
Not as of yet, no. That was an important part of our inventory, but the part of the issue is that was that building needed a lot of capital investment, and I couldn't get it, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councilor Mary Ann LaBarge, and then I think Mr. Horner wants.
Also, too, we're talking about Augie's, because even in social services, Mayor, you were there at that meeting where it was brought up about Augie's. But even with our veterans agent, Steve Connors, I mean, he had difficulties trying to place our veterans who served our country, both men and women. He finally was able to place 17, not just in our city, but regionally. So it's a big problem that we don't have enough SROs.
Councilor, and I know Mr. Horner wants to.
Are we, so we're debating a motion that's been made and seconded?
I
We
don't
did
know if
that.
it was made or seconded.
I wasn't sure.
Let's make sure it gets moved and seconded.
I would move
Okay, thank you.
I think it was.
I just wasn't sure. Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't.
Second.
All right.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that I could talk.
Yes,
Okay,
you can.
fine. Okay.
Didn't stop me.
I just wanted to express my support. This is located in my ward, in Ward 4, and Valley CDC, as they always do, was very proactive in terms of reaching out and letting me know about this one as a potential project. And I think, just got finished cutting the ribbon on the School Street project, which is another great project that Valley CDC just completed. And I think in addition to meeting all the things that we're talking about SROs, I think it also really fits in with our ideas about creating a sustainable Northampton, because these are houses that are close to bus routes, they're walkable, they're going to be right near the new bike access to the bike trail, and so I think it's great to have a mix of this kind of housing that's also close for people and convenient for people who need to get to jobs or need to get places. They can hop on a bus or hop on a bike lane or have plenty of sidewalks to get to where they need to go. So I think it's great that we're doing not only the SRO replacement, but we're also creating sustainable housing of all income types throughout the city.
Councilor Mary Ann LaBarge.
Right, also too, if you look at what Joanne Campbell had given us on information, she talks about the SROs include folks working in low-paying custodial, retail, and food service positions in downtown Northampton, individuals working in landscaping and doing custodial work at an area hospital. So we have a mix of diversity here. So, I mean, we need to make sure that we have places for people to be able to live in and not be out in the streets. I have a lot of concerns about this. I know this has been a big issue. My phone today was going off the wall. I don't know why, but it was going off the wall. And these were not from people from my ward, okay? It was basically coming up from like Ward 5 area and the center of Florence and so forth like that. Jack, I do have some concerns, and maybe you could answer them to me.
This is on the King Street project.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. How many units are going into the King Street prop? It's going to be 8, right?
It's 8, and they're 8 new ones. Can I also say, following on what the mayor said, as I think Joanne's memo made clear, these projects are very complex, and there actually is a lot of financial oversight to bring them in at the lowest dollar amount that you can. And one of the things that happened was that one of the agencies involved required a new appraisal of the property. In the budget that's in the application, the property is listed with an acquisition price of $400,000. Steve Brunel did the appraisal, came in at $300,000, and now the acquisition price is $300,000. So that is an example of how due diligence takes place in this kind of a thing.
I have to say that I didn't get any calls about that house at all. And we also have our own business 2 houses down from that on King Street. I don't have a problem with this. I'm looking at the big picture here. You're talking about the 2nd and 3rd floors of accommodating and putting the SROs in there, and plus being able to have rental space downstairs.
Yeah.
I don't not see a problem with this.
Council Bartley.
Yeah, for the sake of the public who may be watching this discussion, could you explain the enhanced single room occupancy units? Because that suggests that the units are no longer as simple as they used to be in order to build that, either by change of laws or at least the change in the concept of them, but these are more complicated. And I don't know if you can do that, if Joanne.
Let me give an answer, and you can kick me in the back of the leg or something if I give
You can also recognize Ms. Campbell if you want to answer.
The traditional SROs have, in essence, bedrooms and then shared bathrooms and shared kitchen space.
These are not.
There's a point of view that while that may be one model that's useful in some places and in some ways and for some people, that there's another model, the enhanced SRO, really creates I think a very small studio apartment. It's basically a one room, but it has a bathroom and it has its own kitchen. Kitchenette. So it gives more privacy to the people living there than they get in the traditional SRO.
And it also means that there's less shared space that needs to be maintained by the landlord or the tenant. So you don't have shared kitchens and baths that have to be dealt with collectively.
Can I also say, I'm sorry.
You have a question, Mr. Council Dowd?
Just wanted to add that also on these properties, we're getting 99-year affordability.
99-year affordability. As you know, a preservation guarantee of some kind is something that we look for every project that we possibly can. Certainly in this one we can. I'd also just like to say 2 other things. One, there's been a lot of talk in the city for the last several years about the importance of planning, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that the Housing Partnership has prioritized. In fact, the support letter for one of the they both say the partnership has prioritized the preservation and creation of SRO units in the city. So the Housing Partnership is your affordable housing board, and it has prioritized this kind of housing. So I want to share that with you. And then also just as a reminder that these projects leverage enormous amounts of state money. Is there any federal money or is it state?
It could be home money in there.
So it could be state or federal. And I know that there are some people in the community, I think that people who have been calling you, perhaps Councilor Labarge, right, who are concerned not maybe just about the CPA part of it, but about the overall unit cost and the overall cost of the projects. And what I want to say to you is that money is going to be spent somewhere in Massachusetts. People, other communities, other CDCs, I don't know who, are going to apply, and somebody's going to get the money. So it's going to be spent. Our view on the Community Preservation Committee is that it ought to be spent here. And just as a reminder, the King Street project, the CPA money would comprise 10.7% of the budget, and the Maple Street 12.4%. That's the greatest amount of leveraging that we've ever had in any CPA projects, as far as I know. And it's a really, I think, important point for the council to know that even if these projects get voted down, the money's going to be spent somewhere to create these kind of units in some other community.
Thank you. That was actually the point I was going to bring out, Jack. I just saw that in the application. And so if we're talking relatively, since we brought up the percentages earlier for the previous projects, I think we saw 57%, 79%, 43%. So 10.9% of a project is a really, you know, it's probably the smallest amount in terms of the total budget that we're putting out. And then the other point I wanted to make, and I've brought this up before, and it's come up in discussions in the housing partnership, you know, just national statistics on demographics. As much as there's a lot of talk about family housing and what family housing may be able to be acquired for similar costs, I mean, the fact is that in terms of demographics, there are more single people without children than there are either married or single people with children in terms of population nationally. And if Northampton is in any way reflective of national statistics, we do have to make sure that that population is housed.
That's right.
Council Marion LaBarge. Did you forget?
Yeah, I did because I was listening to the percentage and stuff. That's
You
fine.
want to have a moment of quiet
Yes,
respect
I
for
need.
each other.
Please. Also, too, I know for probably about 5 years, there was, and Mayor, you know this also, that there was a huge outcry here in the city about affordable homes. I'm not talking about apartments, homes. And we're not seeing this. And I have to say, people in my ward would say, where are the homes?
Well, let me
So hopefully, and I talked with Jack about this, I emailed him about my concerns, and I'm hoping that we really look at this big picture in the city.
We're
So that
having
we
a-
can have the homes.
We, if you were reading the paper last week, you might have
I wasn't
noticed,
here.
well, that we, at the state hospital, the CAC at least voted to expand the number of homes allowed to be built there for home ownership. And that,
For the working families.
and I think a third now we're aiming to have for what we're calling workforce housing. So, and you also may recall, as a part of the Smith College affordable housing program, the housing on State Street is available for people at a higher income than the housing we're talking about now, to try to get to people who are a little bit higher level. So we're trying to...
Homes with their own backyard.
Well, at the state hospital, that's what we're talking about, at the state hospital. And we already did 26, there were already 26 units built at the state hospital.
Right, but they would be on a tax roll.
Absolutely. But this is on the tax roll too. These SROs are on the tax roll too. These are not off the tax rolls, so they're paying taxes. Yeah. Are we ready to vote on the King Street project? Yeah, Counselor?
No, I would like to make some comments, because there's some commonalities between this one and the next one. There's some differences. This one creates 8 new units. That one simply refurbishes 11 existing units. But there's some commonalities between them, and I too heard from a lot of people from Ward 5, and since I'm the counselor from there, I listened to them. And a lot of what they commented about was the cost. And affordable housing is important, and SRO rooms are important, and homelessness is important. These are important issues. But at $220,000 to $230,000 a pop, we're not going to make a dent in the problem. For a single room to cost us in that range, we're never going to make a dent in the problem. This is not a sustainable dollar amount to address the overall size of this issue. Now, people can make cases for the fact that this is what it costs to provide a room, but if this is really what it costs, we're going to fail miserably to house all these people. I have constituents whose homes are not worth this, entire homes. We're talking about workforce affordability at the state hospital being $300,000, and what's that, $60,000, $70,000 more than one room. I mean, we really have to look at this problem and say, are we making a dent in it? Now, we can say we're putting $475,000 into both of these projects, and it's going to be $4 million projects for between the two of them, but we're housing 19 people for $4 million. Is that sustainable? Is that the way we want to spend our money to solve a problem that's huge? I can't think so. In my world, being a real estate professional, we have an economic principle called cost versus value. This is cost, $4 million. But what is the value? I mean, we have to think about that. We're putting $475,000, I think, is the largest we've spent on any single thing under CPA, correct?
No.
Have we spent more than that on a single item?
Forbes Library.
On the Forbes Library, okay. This is a large amount of money. And when my constituents talk to me and say, this number is just astronomical between these two units, and they say, how can we afford to do this? I agree that the problem is there. I agree that the problem needs to be addressed, but is this an efficient way to do it? How many people should we be able to house for $220,000 to $230,000? And the answer to me is not one. We need to do better.
I actually think I don't disagree with you. The dilemma is the people who are willing to give us the money give it to us with significant numbers of strings that I think pretty dramatically increase the cost of the housing. And I think the housing is important enough that we should do it anyway. But I don't necessarily disagree with you. If the private sector could do it for less, they would do it, and they're not doing it.
Well, so, again, that's given the nature of the housing. But when you look at the village of Florence, I don't think have any more private SROs up there, and that enters into the question when public, if we create a $220,000 or $30,000 SRO room, could a private SRO room compete? I mean, Augie said what, 21 rooms?
22.
22 times 200 and something thousand dollars. In Augie's wildest dreams, his building isn't worth that. Wildest dreams.
And in Augie's, it wasn't enhanced SROs, and that created significant problems for that building.
Sure did.
So,
Absolutely. But essentially, government is taking the private supplier out of the business, because in a free marketplace, if I can get an Augie's room or a $225,000 room, Augie's is out of business. I mean, it is a dilemma.
yeah, I'm not sure I totally agree with that,
I
but
probably am just repeating what the mayor said another way, and I do agree with you as well. But we see this in a lot of areas, how much it costs us to build a bridge or to fill a pothole, or the state to do a lot of things, or the federal government to do things. But as a real estate agent, I would ask you, if I came to you as a client and said, boy, I want to do, these SROs privately and sell them, you would probably tell me, you're not going to be able to do this. It's not going to sell. You're not going to be able to make money on them. And that's why it's not happening. And so I agree with you. I just don't know. I think long range, those are things we need to think about. How are we going to solve this larger issue? And how are we going to change the whole process, both on a federal level and a state level? But I don't think we're going to do that here tonight in this council chambers, and yet we can all feel frustrated by it.
Councilor Bardsley.
I've heard a similar concern, and certainly when Councilor Murphy presents those figures, they do make one pause. But the question I think then we face is, what are the alternatives? I mean, we can't do nothing. But here the figures of the cost of one room unit is worth more than my condo. I could rebuy my condo for the cost of that. So I think I would like to hear Joanne Campbell, if we could, talk about what are the realistic costs, and within sort of like the range of costs for this type of units, is this in the ballpark, or is this something that could these be more frugal proposals, or is this the cost of providing this type of housing?
Joanne Campbell, Valley.
Need a motion to recognize.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Joanne Campbell, Valley CDC. As I prepared the memo to the City Council, we are beholden to a number of requirements that do drive up the cost of housing and the development of housing. And these are numbers that are realistic. We apply to the state for any of our housing projects on a competitive basis at the state level. So if our numbers are way out of whack, we are not going to get funded. So we are in line. We consistently talk when we're looking at any new project, whether it's preservation or new construction. We talk with CDAC, which is an affordable housing lender who provides both acquisition financing and pre-development financing, helping us move the project forward with different feasibility tasks. And they let us know whether the numbers are close to what the state is seeing both in Western Mass and across the state. And for instance, when we were negotiating a sales price for the King Street project, we had not yet gotten an appraisal. We needed to get, in order for CDAC to allow us to spend any money under pre-development, we need to have site control. So we were negotiating with the owner of the building. We've been talking with her since last March, and came to a price that we thought, and we actually discussed with CDAC, what do you think this, what's the state seeing for acquisition prices around the state for this type of building in this type of a community? And felt that 400, the owner wanted $525,000 for that building. And we negotiated 400, and we then had an agreement. And then the first thing that we do before we spend any other money, because we didn't spend any money, the owner luckily accepted a $100 deposit on that property, and we went forward with an appraisal that CDAC paid for, and the value came in at $300,000, and that is the price we're paying for the building. And we actually have been working on an acquisition loan with CDAC for the past 2 months, and we are closing on the building on Monday. We've been approved for an acquisition loan. So, I mean, there's a process, and so CDAC also looks at us as they're lending us money with the assumption that we are going to be successful at the state level, that our numbers that we've shown, both development budgets and operating budgets, which are projected out over 20 years, that we are going to be competitive at the state level because they need to be paid back. I mean, we're borrowing this money and they need to be paid back. So they're looking at what is the long, what's the process. So we are in the numbers. For example, and again, just for the environmental piece, we have to do lead, asbestos, radon. Now, a private developer might go into a building, decide to demolish the whole inside. No one asks he or she to go in and test the plaster walls to see if there's asbestos in there, to see if it's in the caulking. We need to do that. I mean, the School Street property.
Why do you have to do that? Because your funding sources require.
Private developers are required to do it too, but nobody, under the environmental, no one asks them to do that. No one's really following up. So, School Street, for example, $150,000 of demolition costs to cover demolition as well as asbestos removal and lead removal. So we have, we're subject to higher standards. There are a lot of different lending sources here. Everyone has an attorney. So we are in line with state projects. Otherwise, we wouldn't get funded.
Why isn't the market producing these houses? Why isn't the market producing this?
Well, first of all, the rents are restricted. So you're going to have a restricted rent stream. And so if someone was going to buy a building at $300,000 and would renovate, this is a shell right now, this is nothing in the building, and renovated the building and charged folks whatever the going rate is, $400, $500 a month, we will be looking to get subsidies so that people are only going to pay 30% of their income, so therefore we can serve people who are much lower of the market. There would not be, if someone had to buy the building, develop the building to a standard that is livable, and be able to collect the rents to pay back a mortgage to the bank and make some, private developers going to want to see some cash flow that is going into their pocket, they're not going to see it. I mean, we can look at the Go West as an example. A number of private developers looked at that building over the years. We've been trying to, we were trying to get our hands on that building for a number of years. The owner did not want to sell that for less than a certain amount of money. A number of private developers came through, could not get financing for that building because it was in such bad repair. The amount of money that it would cost to repair that building was astronomical, and no one could get funding. So, it really is like a public project in the sense that $3 million goes into that project, and yes, it only appraises for about, I think the appraisal was maybe $475,000 at completion. That's market value.
We actually have had that problem in some of our commercial developments as well, where people put in a lot more money.
Oh, it's because there's all that deferred payment loan in the building, because the building is, those units are gonna be affordable units for 99 years.
So explain that mechanism.
That, we get that deferred payment, deferred loans, which is basically free money, as long as we maintain that housing as affordable housing, which means the rents are restricted. In the case of Go West, it is probably 80% of the units have to be available to people at 60% of the median or less, and 20% have to be available to people at 50% or less.
So
the reality on SRO is more people are below.
So the loan, in essence, is acting as the rent subsidy. Is that right?
It's acting as a development subsidy in order to develop the building.
Right, but if you don't have to pay the loan back.
We don't have to pay the loan back.
So you don't have to make.
We don't have to, right.
Make the payment out of the rent.
Correct.
The point is
that is correct.
That yes, the unit cost looks high, but the subsidy is built into some of that unit cost.
Yes, and
That's
we
the
do,
point.
some of the buildings do have a small loan, school.
Right, you are paying some money back, but overall, the high development cost, part of that high development cost is actually subsidizing the rent.
Right, so that we can charge, low
the
rents
lower
because
rent.
we don't
And
have,
and I
we don't have a mortgage.
I appreciate what Councilor Murphy is saying, but the way the state and federal government have decided to develop housing is to do it in this way. High upfront money, and then it's subsidizing it throughout some period of time of the project, right? Is it a sane way to do it? I don't know. But that's the only way they've given us to get to this goal.
That's the way they're making it.
But also, this is the only, they're saying we want you, if you want to develop affordable housing, number one, you have to pay for, prevailing wage.
Not in all projects, no, but there's thresholds that.
Depending on the project.
Depending on the project.
You have to meet certain regulatory requirements, but then they're saying, here's all the money that we're gonna give you, but you don't have to pay it back in the same way. It ends up being a rent subsidy. Okay?
If I were a private developer, and if I were just me and want to take on a project like this, would it be possible for me to get the kinds of loans you're able to get?
Private developers can access some of those funds. Some are specifically for nonprofits. Others can be like low-income housing tax credits, which of course the market is dead for those at the moment. Yes, but you'd have to be an experienced developer and have a team, but.
So that explains in part why the private sector is not offering units like these at its own initiative. Am I correct? Because the loans that
no one wants to deal with
available on the whole to the private individual.
When I was on housing partnership, we spent a lot of time trying to find private developers to take on projects. They didn't want to do them.
Couldn't do it.
Yeah. They didn't want to do them. Oh, yeah.
Well, I just wanted to address Councilor Bardsley's questions about alternatives. As I understand it, ServiceNet is abandoning the Valley Inn on Locust Street, which is a 10 to 12 unit, basically SRO, and they're walking away from it. And I know the landlord would be happy to lease it to another agency to continue to run it, and I'm assuming that would cost less than $200,000 a room. I'd appreciate it if before second reading you could check with them and see what's up with that.
I understand it's not an SRO, that ServiceNet, that was a group home. I checked into, I talked to Peg or through email, that it's not an SRO, it's a group home. And
is it a viable project to continue it? Because it's going away and it provides services now.
I actually think they're moving the units, not going away.
They're moving the individuals to other, I don't know why they're moving out of that.
The structure remains and it's been in service for some time. Is it a viable project to keep going to provide housing?
I can't answer that.
I would ask the landlord whether or not he's willing to convert
He
it.
is.
Is he willing to convert it to SRO rooms and run an SRO?
He has been leasing it. It's an inspected, approved group home now that's providing housing to people, and he is willing to continue to lease it to somebody to continue to run it. So it's a viable thing, and he would like to do that. He'd like somebody to contact him from an agency and say, we'll continue to use the facility in this way to house people.
It's a different housing type than SRO, but it's a reasonable question.
And I think it's 10 to 12.
I don't know I know the building.
It's on Locust Street next to the Silk Mill.
We don't count it in our SRO inventory.
Because it's
not an SRO.
It would have to be
services.
I mean, part of it would have to be some affordability restriction as far as what the you know, if we were looking at CPA money and it's privately
I don't think you
owned.
can do that.
This
But I don't know the
it's
answer to
leased, so it's a lot less expensive to run. It's a different population
It
now.
was a DMH, it was a DMH population. I mean,
DMR and DMH, they have,
this is it's a really interesting question. It's an apples and oranges question to a certain extent.
Exactly.
That's all. I don't disagree that it should be asked. I'm just,
And
different population.
Oh, no, well, the other greater question that comes from these dollars, I mean, if there is no way at $200 and some odd thousand a unit from the public side we're ever gonna solve this problem. We just have to admit, there's always gonna be homeless people we're not gonna be able to deal with, because we're not gonna be able to afford to handle it. If that's what it really costs to handle it, there's just always gonna be a population we can't afford to serve. And I do firmly believe that the private sector can't compete with us. You know, I know Kevin, who ran the Go West building, said one of the things that causes me problems is you got 60 North Maple Street and the ServiceNet building that have much nicer rooms than I have for similar money. I can't put people in my rooms. My rooms aren't as nice as theirs. So we do drive them away from the private sector. You know, it's a disincentive for them to provide those rooms. The other issue I've heard about this week is the CPA itself, and people told this to me, that the survival of the CPA in Northampton. We spend money in ways that people don't like. The CPA passed by a very narrow margin. I supported it, but I don't want to see it go away. I don't want to see public sentiment shift away from continuing the CPA because we spend monies in ways they don't like. I mean, we're looking at a very tough financial year, and I worry about that. And I heard that from people in my ward today. I don't want to see the CPA go away because people don't like the way we're spending the money.
I appreciate the council's concerns, and I can understand why people look at some of these projects and what we're spending on the surface and have that kind of reaction. But that's why I thought it was important to have Joanne come up and explain some of the complexities with this. And it's stuff that I don't know all the details, and I find it very helpful. But her putting a face other than a council face on this project to show what it takes to go through and all the work that it goes through, I hope people begin to understand that there's more to it than just looking at a price per unit that seems more expensive than the home or the condo they happen to be living in. That is, and we don't have, right now, what I'm taking at face value is we really don't have an alternative. If we want to take care of the folks who do not have a place to live, this is what it costs, and this is what
and I can say that CDAC's Board of Directors was voting on the King Street acquisition loan, which the folks who sit on that Board of Directors are mostly people from state housing agencies, including Tina Brooks, who was the Undersecretary of the Department of Housing and Community Development, and she did quote that this is the kind of project that the state wants to see in order to help reduce homelessness. And as the mayor said, where there is a regional plan to reduce homelessness or to eliminate, I use the word reduce, homelessness. I have been part of that on the housing side. I'm also part of a regional piece that HAP and a number of nonprofit housing developers in Western Mass, including Berkshire and Franklin County and Hampton and Hampshire, of looking at what we can do around homeless housing and providing services. And so they have a grant from another state agency that's looking at how can we create more housing units, as the mayor alluded to, for both families and for individuals. And this complex rules and regs and financing system where we need to pull together 6 or 7 financing sources is a headache for everyone. We constantly advocate for why can't we just go to one funding source who funds whole projects and sort of reduce, and it's just, hasn't got there. But this is the only way right now to fund these housing projects. There's a range of funding sources you can go to.
Well, this is in first reading, and it sounds like people have more questions, and there will be more questions, and we'll be taking up at the next meeting. You have 2 votes here, 3 votes left, actually. And the other thing that I think might be useful is, I've been meaning to schedule a presentation on the 10-year plan to end homelessness. And would that be useful for you to have
Yes.
a presentation on that? I've been meaning to do that, and I can do that at the next meeting if you'd like.
That'd be great.
Some of the people who worked on that can come and speak to that. But I think one of the things that came out of that 10-year planning process, both in the 5-year planning process on the state level, was that you can't always quantify the cost-benefit ratio. So we're seeing a cost on this housing side, but the savings often comes out somewhere else, like at the hospital. The hospital stays for people who have permanent housing are dramatically lower than the hospital stays for the people who are in our shelters or on the street. So that there are ways that it balances out that are not neat on the ledger, unfortunately. But maybe we can schedule that and have that conversation as well at the next meeting. That might be helpful in terms of putting this into context.
Can I just make one last comment? I mean, I think obviously for the CPA and the funding, the areas that can get funded, obviously housing is going to be the most, I think, contentious, because folks have strong feelings about whether housing should be provided for certain populations, and obviously the cost is an issue. And so I think it's not to be expected, because whenever housing goes in, low-income housing goes into any particular neighborhood, there is sort of this, what is that going to do to our neighborhood? Who are the folks that are moving in? So I think that's part of the feel as well for, I think, a lot of the questions that get raised.
Are we ready to take a vote? This is only in first reading again. Yeah.
How much money the state's gonna put in, how much do we have to pay back to the state?
Is there any payback to the state on this?
No, we are looking at possibly having a small mortgage.
At a local bank?
With probably local bank, depending on what the cash flow allows.
Okay. Are we ready to vote? Do you want a roll call on this?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Marianne LaBarge?
Yes.
Counselor Raymond LaBarge?
Pass.
Counselor David Murphy?
No.
Counselor Narcoitz?
Yes.
Counselor Reckman?
Yes.
Counselor Spector?
Yes.
Counselor Bardsley?
Yes.
Counselor Carney?
Yes.
Counselor Raymond LaBarge?
Yes.
Okay. Next item is the appropriation of $250,000 from the Community Preservation Act budgeted reserve to fund the Valley Community Development Corporation for the preservation of 11 single-room occupancy units on Maple Street. Is there a second?
Second.
So, rerun most of the discussion, but with a twist. And I think the question here is that this is a preservation rather than new units, and maybe we could have that addressed. That might be helpful. Yeah?
I wanted to talk to Joanne.
She wants to talk to you.
Thank you,
Joe.
Jack. Now, the one on Maple Street is 11 units, right?
Correct.
Now, I know before City Council, we were talking to you, and I had asked if these SROs were going to have their own kitchen and their own bathrooms, because that's important to me. Okay, putting them back into just a single room, using, people using the same bathrooms, to me, that's not normalization or communization, and it's not. So, tonight you told me, well, you're not sure about the plans yet.
You want to speak to that?
Yep, we are still in the process of reviewing potential plans with the architect. And, I should say that the way the process goes is we need to have, in order to go to the state, we have to have any gap funding that's different than what we're going at the state, to have that committed in order to go forward. So there are many steps that we have not reached yet. We're not presenting to you in either project a complete, exact budget, drawings, etc. And we had been moving along on the Maple Street, looking at various designs of the building, and we sort of had to shift gears because the King Street project came and we were applying for acquisition financing. So we don't quite have a final say. We are not sure if we can do enhanced SROs at that site. We're looking at maybe doing just bathrooms. So we still are in the design stage. We're still meeting with our architect. She's had conversations with the planning department about what can be done, what can't be done. We're trying to do this as of right. You know, currently the building is a pre-existing non-conforming use. We may look at bringing the building into current conformity with the local general business district zoning. We will not be losing, there is commercial space there, we will not be losing any of the square footage of the commercial space there. So we're still in a design stage.
Joanne, can I ask you, there's also, around the corner from that, there's a rest home there that had different diversity in there, from DMH, from DMR way back, until they closed it. Has Valley CDC ever looked at the
We looked at the building 2 years ago. Actually looked at it for affordable condos before the market was, but the zoning there requires that the first floor is complete commercial space. So, and so there was limited, based on the acquisition price at that time, it was not feasible.
I was just curious about that.
I think another of the...
Because that's what it was used for before, so.
We were not looking to do, we know that it was the Florence plan of not creating new SRO units in town, so we did not look at that building as SRO, you know, as potential SRO units. Because we had Go West and we have got 16 North Maple.
Some of the concerns that I have received by phone and talking with some of the people up in the Florence area is that apparently with the SRO on Maple Street, apparently ran into some financial problems. Is that right?
Well, one of our concerns is
Were
that...
they having problems with utilities, paying bills or whatever?
That is the one property still that Valley CDC owns directly. It's not in an LLC. It would be if we get funded and move forward. But so Valley CDC owns that building. So we have a $300,000 mortgage on the property that needs to be paid out of the income that is received from the building. And Valley probably makes a contribution every year of about $8,000 to $10,000 for the shortfall. So what we're trying to do in this refinance and redevelopment is also to reduce the debt on the building.
Councilor Reckman.
How is this different from the proposal you brought to us about the same property several months ago?
Sorry, I don't understand.
When we did the expedited review.
Right.
Oh, this.
When I sat down and met with you?
Yeah.
So how is this different, this proposal for that property, different than what you had proposed and then withdrawn several months ago?
It's not different. We had asked the CPC for expedited review because there was a state funding round October 30th, and when we applied, an expedited review means that they sort of take it out of the round, which would have brought us to here. For expedited review, because we felt confident in August when we made the application that we were going to be ready to go for a state application on October 30th. And when we were looking at some of the initial design issues, we didn't have enough time to really make good judgment about what would be the best use. And so we then went to the CPC and told them that, actually, did you recommend? I'm trying to think if you recommended it and then it was withdrawn.
What I think actually happened was, because you can't withdraw, I think it's actually, sorry, I think it's actually, I think we actually tabled it.
You tabled it indefinitely.
Yeah.
So it is, it's the same project, it's just we had all good intentions of being able to move quickly, and we have not been able to.
And so then my concern is, because it doesn't create any new units, what happens if we vote no?
Well, that's a problem, because we need, for state funding sources, we need a local match.
I mean, so let's suppose we vote no, which means you can't do anything to the building. What happens to the building then?
Well, there are a number of issues with the building. One is that a local contractor several years ago had identified a sewage problem in the building and identified that there's a pipe that's under the building that needs to connect and really needs to be corrected. You know, part of our need to start moving this project is there's some things that are sitting there that could, you know, tomorrow the pipe could burst and we could have sewerage. and we'd have to relocate everyone, we'd have no income for the building, you know, the
Like
housing.
Meadowbrook.
Meadowbrook, right. You know, that doesn't mean it's gonna happen. The building was completed in 1992, as you know, so the process takes 2 years to get us somewhere, so we'll be looking at 20 years, major systems need to be replaced, it doesn't, you know, we want to bring it up to current handicapped accessibility standards, which are not there. We would like to really look at the redesign of the building, because there's lower level living space and common space that is not very conducive to decent living. So we're really looking to
So my
create or improve.
conclude that if nothing happened to that building this year, it would continue to exist as a functional SRO for at least a couple more years.
Yeah, we would continue.
I mean, disasters notwithstanding.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
we could
With
reasonably assume that it will continue to be there for at
Right.
least a few more.
We do have the mass development loan, which we refinanced, which was a 10-year note originally, was due to be paid in 2003. It was a balloon payment plus deferred interest. And so mass development reworked that on a temporary basis. We're basically paying the same amount of money, and they've not forgiven anything, but we've got anyway some crazy financing to try to keep the payment the same, and that note is due to be paid in 2012. So we have to refinance the building one way or the other by then. And you know, starting in 2009, with that applying to the state, gives us some opportunity to move to that, to be able to refinance at that time. But you know, there is no, you know, I'm certainly not making a threat. We certainly want to keep the building as is, but you know, there could become a time where we can't make the mortgage payments because expenses keep going up. I think we're going to see, you know, what we projected originally in our budget in June on utilities is not coming to fruition. So, you know, we're getting a little bit of a break on those costs, but there is no restriction. So, Valley could sell the building, but it has no intentions of doing that.
Thank you.
Councilor Dostal.
You said that you were studying whether or not you could do the type of renovation that Councilor Labarge was talking about. And you didn't have enough time to bring that to fruition. How much time is it going to take?
We would know by the next council meeting. Would the design issues, would we have enough time to review? And we've got some preliminary stuff. You have to be recognized.
This is Patrick McCarthy, he's the project manager.
Any discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
The architect has done preliminary design review to see that we could actually do an enhanced style SRO with commercial on the first floor. So we've kind of, at this point, we're satisfied that we can build a product better than what is there now. It may be a modification to the enhanced, and I just want to respond quickly. There is a need for single room SROs with common kitchens and baths, because in this population there is a problem with isolation. So it depends on the individual. So there's a need for both enhanced and also a lodging house type. But going back to what I was originally responding to is that we've pretty much are convinced that we can do an enhanced style, so it would be maybe a common kitchen, but each room would have their own shower and bathroom within the room. The rooms would be much larger than they are now. So right now we're satisfied with that. And we can also add parking and also enhance the commercial space on the first floor.
Councilor Murphy and then Councilor Rickman.
Now, there's 11 rooms there now, but if you put some commercial in the building, it will no longer hold 11 rooms. I mean, that's not a very big building.
There are two buildings.
There's the barn and all.
Yeah, which is not a very, it's not a building conducive to to good commercial space, it's set back, and people miss it. What we'd like to do is incorporate that building into the main building and make the whole first floor commercial, so that it's pushed forward. It will also, it might add a couple extra hundred.
Is that the subterranean first floor or because it's.
Right. There would have, yeah, there would have to be some modifications to the main house to bring it down so that it meets. So it would be a much smaller basement. And first, second, and third floor, you'd have to build up on the commercial, what the commercial is now. It's hard.
So I guess to
25,
answer.
I just want to mention, it's 25 of 11, you have a rule to end at 11. We are in first reading.
I guess to answer Councilman Dostal's answer is that, you know, we do have some preliminary stuff, we're sort of absorbing it ourselves, but, you know, we could bring something forward, you know, after the new year.
So, but my question was, if you turn the lowest level of the building into commercial, does that still leave us with 11?